You really got to hand it to like liberal media and recuperation.
You sure?
Oh no, you do in this particular case, because at the end of the day, there are hundreds of thousands of people right now all over the UK celebrating the fact that there wasn't a revolution. and the funniest thing about that is that it wouldn't have even been a good revolution because he was a weird Catholic. I don't know. What do they call it? What was Guy Fawkes? He was some kind of Luddite, something. I don't know. Anyway, he was a wrong.
Wasn't he like a monarchist Catholic dude or something like that? He was like, there should be more Christianity and kings or some shit like that. He was like anti-parliament because he was like less freedoms, less democracy.
Literally.
There are various things to like or dislike about Bonfire Night. Sometimes the fireworks sounds are too loud for me, but as someone who's like frequently sad when I see the just missing cat or dog posters around, the PSAs that go around that are like, please check there aren't hedgehogs inside your bonfire before you light them, just absolutely break my heart. Like, that's the worst imaginable thing.
Yeah,
I can see it's getting to Kira as well. It's so sad.
Yeah. It is actually.
Yeah, welcome to the Britophobia stream. We're here to undermine Britain and all of its cultural institutions and traditions.
I see that Mule is suppressing himself at the moment.
Yeah, Mule's actually made the Britophobia stream 50% less British, and I really applaud that. I encourage him to go further and also sabotage my stream. So, I guess we'll ask Mule what his base thing is the last. But for now, I'm going to start by saying welcome to Red Planet. And Tim, what was the most base thing you did this week?
So, the most base thing I did this week was actually news to myself, too. Because, unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the Pro-Palestine rally this weekend because of just, like work stuff and all that kind of thing. But I had a bunch of people messaging me saying, hey, we saw you at the rally. All this kind of stuff. People saying oh, you were a little bit far away though, so we couldn't get up and talk to you. And it wasn't me. In fact, it was my brother, my twin brother. This may be news to some Red Planeteers, but I got an identical twin brother. He's actually the one that does some of the music that plays before the stream starts. Anglophobic Nosebleed.
Great name.
That's my twin brother.
Again, this is the Britophobic stream, so that's why we're entirely on brand.
Anglophobic. Yeah, no. So the most base thing I did was actually not even me. It was someone else did it for me. So, phoning in this one. But what about you, Kira? What did you get up to this week?
This week I did a few things. I went to a Palestinian movie screening. We watched the movie by this local anarchist group. The movie was called One More Jump. It's a movie, apparently a documentary about these Gazan teens that do parkour. Just basically it showed what kind of life is like in Gaza. It was pretty powerful, and it was also really cool to get out and actually get to meet some IRL organizers and introduce myself, because I've been meaning to do this for ages, and so I'm glad to finally have a kick in my ass to finally get out there and do it. And I also yesterday went to another pro-Palestine protest where we protested with the Palestinians at Northwestern University. We did a big protest in Evanston, and then we also took the protest through a super rich neighborhood, and then ended up in front of the house of the president of the university, Michael Schill, who actually has been really, really awful in not protecting the Palestinian students at the university, going to the Israeli vigil, but not the Palestinian vigil, condemning Hamas and calling them inhuman, and then also talking about all the Israeli casualties. The regular run-of-the-mill Zionist garbage. And so we stood outside his house and were yelling at him for some time. And this is a really big house, by the way, mansion. This man lives in a mansion. So in case you're wondering. And near the end, the cops started getting all uppity because a few of us were still chanting, and apparently our permit was over and free speech time is done. And I noticed, and the person I was with also noticed, that the cops were only going up to like brown people and harassing brown people and giving them the eye. And so I tried to do what I could because I saw them harassing. So I ran up and I was like, I took my phone and got my camera out, and I was just like trying to be very much physically in the space as a white person, like a white sorority girl who is probably not typically the people that they're trying to target. And also with like, hey, I'm a sorority girl with a camera out, you know, all the implications that come along with that. And luckily the cops backed off, but they piled in. Like there was like 10 of us near the end just yelling ceasefire now. And then like 25 cops showed up, and they're all just sitting there with their whole, like when they put their thumbs in a little vest, just like doing this, and just they kept rolling up. There's just nothing better to do. I hate cops, in case you're wondering.
I know recently the thing about the thumbs in the vest is really bad practice because like it creates an air gap, and those are stab proof vests, and they're supposed to work by like having pressure against the chest and redistributing the impact. So they're actually like just, I'm sure it's a relief. I'm sure the straps are weighing down on them and they're just doing it like, but they do it as if it's like a standard procedure thing that is good and has your hands ready or some shit like this, but it's not. It's just to be comfy, and it's also making their armor not work.
Anyways, yeah, so those are the things I did. Also argue with Zionists. And also I wanted to announce that if you're on Blue Sky and you follow me, I am now creating a Zionist scum mute list in which I find all the Zionists that are doing Zionist stuff on Blue Sky and I add them to the list. If you want to subscribe to that list, it's an ongoing list that I keep adding Zionists to. Please go to my Blue Sky. It's kirachats.bsky.social, and you can go to the list tab and subscribe on there. And if you have any suggestions for people you want me to add, please let me know. Just tag me and I'll add them. So long as they are Zionists, I always check beforehand. And let's just snuff out the Zionist narrative as much as we can, because that we so many Zionists are being paid by Israel to literally being paid by Israel, getting scholarships reimbursed. If they go online and go on social media and say state propaganda. Also, there's many influencers like outside of Israel that are being paid. And there's also just Zionists, period, that are not being paid, but just love the genocide. So if you want to help to snuff out that narrative, please, subscribe to that list. It's free to subscribe, in case you're wondering. The word subscribe sounds like it's paid, but it's a free thing. So anyways, my sweet Sophie, what were you up to this week?
My week was pretty similar to last week, which my most base thing last week was also caring for partners. But yeah, it's just the same week I've had, really. One of my girlfriends has had a month signed off work because of depression, gotten like a doctor's sick note to like fully just like take time and recover. And then another of my girlfriends, who's also her girlfriend, was hanging out with her, and I popped by and cooked them both lunch. And just like, it's sometimes it's a quiet week, and the most basic thing you do is just like cook a meal, and it was nice. A reminder that we want to know what based things you've been doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. Tim, could you possibly tell us about this first piece?
Yeah, okay. United Auto Workers secure tentative agreement with General Motors. So the United Auto Workers, so that's the UAW, have reached a tentative agreement with General Motors, which, if ratified by members, would end the 6-week strike action taken against the car manufacturers. The new contract would incrementally grant 25% base wage increases through April 2028 and starting wage increases of 70%. These increases will apply to both hourly and salaried workers, the latter of which have not received equivalent pay rises since first organizing in 1990. That's like 33 years. The agreement also eliminates several wage tiers harmful to newer employees, who have often been forced to find secondary employment to support themselves, and provides additional retirement benefits, including payments to retirees and surviving spouses for the first time in over 15 years. Additionally, the new terms restore several benefits lost during the Great Recession, including cost of living allowances and a 3-year wage progression, allows employees at key battery manufacturing plants to be included in the contract, and gives workers a right to strike over plant closures. The agreement with GM is similar to deals struck with Stellantis and Ford Motor Company. Union members will be voting on whether or not to ratify the new contract in the next few weeks. So yeah, I think we covered the UAW strike the other week, but yeah, a little update there. It is pretty great to see across all industries at the moment a lot of these big strikes happening, and I hope, yeah, can I hope the best for them. It seems like it's pretty huge, right? Starting wage increases of 70% and even like 25% base wage increases through April 2028. Like that's pretty huge. Even like I think a lot of the like retirement benefits and stuff are going to be things that we're going to see people striking for a lot more these days, when even like globally the average age of renters is getting higher and higher, and like there's a lot of people that are retiring now that, you know, historically they might have retired into a home that they had paid off over their life of working, whereas like now that's just not happening, and there's a lot of elderly people that are renters, and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on with like, you know, tenants unions and things like that, like a lot of the stuff that Mule is very heavily engaged with. But I think a lot of this stuff actually going to the, you know, like the industries that people are employed in for their entire lives before that point, I think is going to be a huge thing as well. So yeah, that's interesting. We'll see how that develops over the next couple of weeks as they vote on the new contract. How about Sophie? Why don't you tell us about this next one here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love hearing about big union wins always. Much less love hearing about the UK government, but unfortunately that's what I've got for you. The British government proposes new legislation to define anyone, quote, undermining Britain as an extremist. The government, specifically staff working for Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, that's his real title. I'm so embarrassed and ashamed of this country all the time. Have drafted legislation that would define anyone who is, let's see what the exact wording is, undermining the country's institutions and its values as an extremist. Since the beginning of the show, we've been talking about the ways that the state will try and crack down on political protest and political expression, and how this will only lead to more people wanting to, you know, push for the most that they can achieve for the, you know, if every political act that disagrees with the government is illegal, then it really becomes a sort of like, how much political expression can you buy with your sentencing kind of thing, right? If you're gonna get some amount of time in jail because you, I don't know, undermined the BBC or whatever that means, then you'll want to do the most that you can for that amount of time, right? So this is just really foolish. As The Guardian has pointed out, the proposals have provoked a furious response from civil rights groups, with some warning it risks criminalizing dissent and would significantly suppress freedom of expression. One Whitehall official said the concern is that this is a crackdown on freedom of speech. The definition is too broad and will capture legitimate organizations and individuals. Amnesty International, specifically Ilyas Nagdi, Amnesty International's UK Racial Justice Director, said this definition must not be accepted or implemented. The definition of extremism and its usage in counterterrorism policies like counterterrorism strategy PREVENT is already being applied so broadly it seeks to effectively hinder people from organizing and mobilizing. Yes, it does. That's exactly the point. The proposed definition takes this even further and could criminalize any dissent. Again, I will say, you know, this is the view of the show that this can only lead to more extreme dissent and also more organized dissent, because people understand that there is safety in numbers. The state, once again, bringing about its own demise. The Guardian again here. Last week, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, described pro-Palestinian demonstrations in London as hate marches, prompting dismay from many participants who consider themselves peace campaigners. Saturday, during the pro-Palestinian march, thousands assembled, is what the Guardian has said. They are incorrect. It was hundreds of thousands. It was 500,000 in London's Trafalgar Square, with 11 arrests made. There is a significant concern among some officials because they they consider the broader definition could be used against legitimate organizations fiercely opposed to certain government institutions or calling for their abolition. They are, many guests we've had on the show spring to mind. They are concerned a wider range of individuals could be no-platformed or reported as suspected extremists in official files. A government spokesperson said, actually, I don't care what a government spokesperson says. They're Tories and they're fascists. So it's Tim again. Do you want to tell us about Palestine Action?
Yeah, so friends of the show, Palestine Action, have been ramping up their actions in the face of genocide. In the UK, on November 2nd, which was the 106th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, activists from Palestine Action targeted Britain's Foreign Office and are currently occupying the weapons firm Leonardo at their London HQ. Leonardo's London offices have been covered in red paint to symbolize the Palestinian bloodshed by their weaponry. Whilst one activist remains on top of the company's front overhang, elsewhere, the Foreign Office in London was sprayed in messages including "Britain guilty" and "Fuck Balfour." I'm not sure if the activist is still up there, by the way, but in the articles I saw, they still were. They've been doing this every year for a while. So this isn't actually a new thing, but it just happens that, you know, like with the current thing going on, like they normally paint the entire thing with this red paint, they spray paint messages and stuff. So it obviously has you know, their messages have been updated for the current conflict. So the Balfour Declaration is actually the declaration that officially kind of signed off that the land that, you know, is Palestine was to be given to, you know, the colonial project of Zionism, which became, you know, the state of Israel, which the position of the people of Palestine and, you know, like a lot of other people is that Britain never had a right to do this in the first place, you know? It was beginning then that they started kind of clearing Palestinian towns and everything like that to get way to build up towards what eventually became the kind of the Nakba, which was when they started legitimately forcing the Palestinian people out, like very directly. But yeah, so it actually began a lot earlier than a lot of people realize. We covered this a little bit in the stream the other week where we went into like the history of things, how it goes like a lot of people think that it all began kind of post World War II, but its roots were a lot earlier. Even earlier than 1917, a lot of people say like there is stuff going back into the late 1800s that kind of show that this was always the intention. So Palestine Action UK have been doing this for a long time, and they've been active in all kinds of things. But recently, we have seen the pop-up of Palestine Action US. So we also talked about this on the stream the other week, where there was definitely something fishy going on with their social media presence, where we did this on stream and we encouraged people to go to their Twitter page and try and follow them and stuff. And it just wasn't working. Like, no matter what you did, you couldn't follow them. So that was the page of the US section of Palestine Action that were inspired by the actions of Palestine Action UK to begin their own group. And so 9 activists with Palestine Action US were arrested on Monday during a rally at the Cambridge office of Elbit Systems. So Elbit Systems are the same group that have the offices and factories in the UK. And Palestine Action have been really good at shutting down just by drawing attention to what happens there. So, yeah, they have some offices over in Cambridge in the States. This is in Massachusetts. And yeah, so 9 activists got arrested during a rally there. Over 200 people there in total had gathered there to protest. So this is at Bishop Allen Drive and Prospect Street. So that's the location. So it's a major thoroughfare in Cambridge. On the day of the protest, businesses located in the building where Elbit holds a lease advised employees not to come to work. So they knew that this protest was going to come. They said, like, this is what we're going to do. And they were like, all right, fuck it. You know, let's just shut up shop for the day. Like, you know, no one come to work, which is like a victory. So, yeah, leading activists to call the protest an effective day-long shutdown of the Elbit location. And so that's the thing, right? Like, and it's the same with what Palestine Action UK did with the Elbit locations over there, just occupying the space, drawing attention to what they're doing there, and just making a fuss about it is usually enough for them just to be like, oh, actually, you know, fuck it, we'll just shut down for the day. And it's like, okay, well, you know, if you can do it one day, you can do it again, you know, like, and then you can do it, like, if you're shutting it down one day a week, for a while, maybe you can step that up. It's like, what if you shut them down for a week? What does that mean for their bottom lines? Because at the end of the day, it's like they will only operate as long as it is profitable for them to do so, right? Like
Palestine Action UK has also shown this principle to work with like proper Tom and Jerry shit. Like Elbit has been like shutting down entire factories, and like it's cost them so much money. It's literally cheaper for them to open a new factory in a new location somewhere else in the UK.
Yeah. It is the war crime factory. They don't care about being exposed with their crimes or whatever like that. Like that when you're protesting a group like this and you're like you're talking about what they're doing, you're not trying to appeal to the corporation itself. Like they don't care. They know exactly what they do. They know what these things are for. There is no kind of like liberal, I guess, kind of like what is it, like the West Wing kind of appeal to their better nature or whatever. Like that shit doesn't work. But drawing attention, to the public, to them, that's like that's who you're speaking to when you do a protest like this. The primary function is to stop them, like to make it hard for them to get to work, hard for them to operate their business, all that kind of stuff. And it's just about hitting them in the bottom line, the profit margin. That's the effective tactic for a lot of these kind of businesses that operate this way in the Imperial Core. So Palestine Action US is a new formation taking inspiration from the direct action-oriented group Palestine Action in the UK. Palestine Action US was organized in recent weeks amid Israel's ongoing genocidal siege and bombardment of Gaza, which has killed 8,805 Palestinians so far. So far, the group has focused its efforts on the Albert Systems office in Cambridge, but Chambers says that new chapters are being organized throughout the US to target other Albert hubs in the United States. We would like to see people everywhere on Earth escalate their opposition to this, he said. Chambers emphasized that while mass marches are important, direct actions targeting the Israeli war machine are also essential. We want to see people marching in the streets by the hundreds of thousands. That's really good, and we want to see more. Like, you can see, like hundreds of thousands of people coming out in some of the biggest cities on Earth. It was like 2 million people in Indonesia came out for Palestine. That's like wild. So imagine this is like 200 people at this Albert location was enough to shut it down for the day. Like there is a mass movement for this, and it's like you kind of got to think about, like, marches are great, but what's the next step? And that's things like this, like direct action. But so Kira, why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown on what's happening with the Scholastic Books employees?
Yeah, so Scholastic Books, I'm back up a little bit. Scholastic Books has been in the news a bit because their bigoted practice of siloing books that are woke, giving schools an option to opt out of showing woke books at book fairs, the Scholastic book fairs, that got them in the news and got them a lot of bad press.
You couldn't make the hungry caterpillar nowadays. It have to be woke.
Thank you, Soph. They were putting all their diverse books, like ones with like BIPOC characters or queer characters, or even topics like that included racism and immigration. They would put them in like a single book fair case. And then they would give school libraries the option to be like, opt out of those books being shown. And many people involved many of these like administrators were like, yeah. And they even kind of pushed it. They were like, kind of like encouraging opting out of this, which was not good. So this really effectively offered schools a bigotry button. So after experiencing some backlash for its decision, Scholastic wrote a letter of apology to its authors and illustrators, recognizing the pain caused, and did like a whole apology. But that has left a lot of people kind of really skeptical about this company for good reason. And also, we all know how corporations are when they're offering these so-called sincere apologies to the public. We'll wait and see what happens. But until then, now the employees are really upset with Scholastic, because now they're like, wait a minute, this is $1 billion company and I'm not even being paid living wages to work at Scholastic. What's going on? So unionized workers at Scholastic are walked out in protest of the $1 billion company's refusal to pay its workers fair wages, and specifically its rejection of the Scholastic Union's proposal for annual raises. Members of Scholastic Union didn't report to work on November 1st as part of a one-day stoppage, and instead rallied via Zoom and held an in-person protest and picket outside of Scholastic's corporate headquarters that day. So they said, what we are asking for from $1 billion company is enough to live on as employees. And this was said by Sandra Rowland, who's a member of the Scholastic Union. We have members who have had to use their retirement savings to keep up with the inflationary costs and rent increases since the pandemic. That's unacceptable for a company who professes to be dedicated to the highest quality of life in community and nation. Flagrantly hypocritical, Scholastic wants the public to believe that it values the, quote, worth and dignity of each individual, as its company credo says, but yet it refuses to pay living wages and it tramples on the legal rights of its unionized employees. So solidarity with Scholastic's employees. I hope that y'all get what you're looking for because you deserve it. So, do you want to tell me what's going on in Oakland?
Fucking desperately. I'm so excited about this story. I already said, I think last week that when I saw Workers for a Free Palestine in the UK, it got very emotional. It was very moving. This week, honestly, it's even more exciting. Protesters at the Port of Oakland have blocked a US ship transporting weapons to Israel. So this is community members from Oakland and workers banding together. Groups Critical Resistance and the International Long-Term Warehouse Union band together to stop the departure of US military ships packed with arms to continue Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Yeah, it was huge. So many people showed up there. I believe, though, people got onto the boat. They did everything to blockade it, stop it leaving. I remember seeing about them tying it to the dock or something. Protesters chanted, stood blocking access to the ship, and even chained themselves to the ship. I think that's the picture we're showing now, yeah? Cops tried to break through the fence to force the protesters to stop. But they were not able to force the protesters to stop. Workers began to have revelations about the violence they were participating in. One contractor posted this on his Snapchat: "I'm just a contractor. This feels terrible." Some workers disembarked. Again, it's really similar to, we've already been talking a bit about Palestine Action UK, right? But reaching out into the local community and being like, hey, this absolutely horrible thing that you're aware of in the news and it feels like it's really, really far away. Actually, it's not really far away. They're doing it right here and facilitating it right here. I think when we had Huda on from Palestine Action, she was saying about being able to initially talk to the workers at Elbit factories until they ended up just replacing them all with the fascist guy they could and a bunch of machines. But yeah, that it would just really quickly get people thinking no, this sucks. I don't want this at all. Similar thing happened here. It took cops detaining 3 people and violently breaking through lines of steadfast protesters there since dawn multiple times. The genocide ship eventually did leave. The protesters did delay it for 9 hours, exposed it, and raised alarm to communities in
Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Northwest, okay. Pacific Northwest, who are already organizing for when it arrives. Yeah, that's it. It's very, it's heartening to see that.
I just want to add that this, as much as it sucks that the ship did go, like Sophie was saying, it is really fantastic that so much solidarity was shown and was so visibly, this ship was so visibly outed as doing what it's doing. Like Sophie said, exactly. This stuff is not far away and another planet and I heard about it. This is here. Palestine liberation is everyone's liberation. It starts here, right? And I'm so excited. I'm so proud of these protesters. And so much, I just feel so much solidarity with them, that they were so steadfast with their fight and were so brave with their fight. And I also need to say that with regards to people, that contractor being oh, this feels terrible. Yeah, it's, poke fun at the contractor for not realizing really the gravity of what they've been participating in. But I also think it's really heartwarming to see that all the stuff we're doing is actually rippling into the normies, right? Because sometimes it feels like it's just us and then it's just cops. And these are the only 2 islands and we're battling each other. But honestly, whenever we're doing these protests isn't the thing that's going to actually change the government. It's making everyone else start to open their eyes to the things that we're trying to tell them. And that's the thing that changes, right? So
it's consciousness raising.
Right. So it's really exciting to see workers disembarking because they're actually, this might be wrong of me. And contractors being this feels actually really bad. Yes, thank you. This is good. We're actually getting people to start opening their eyes to this. So I'm very, very impressed with the Critical Resistance and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. It's also really cool to see a group that's been fighting for Palestinian rights also band with like workers, like a worker union, which is like so incredibly based, like so excessively based.
I think it also goes back to the old anarchist concept of the propaganda of the deed. Like when people see that you do something, they see that you care enough to do something, right? So it's like when you give them a pamphlet that's like, hey, Israel's bad, they're like, sure, I think I've heard many people believe that. But when they see you like stopping a ship going there with the weapons, they're like, damn, you like really care about this. It must matter a lot.
And also it's a real thing. It's not a pamphlet.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real, no, exactly, right? It's like the propaganda of the deed is infinitely more potent than the propaganda of the word, because everyone, it's just like seeing, seeing a cop shop with all its like windows smashed or something, right, is infinitely more meaningful to people, especially if it's like your local cop shop, that like you're gonna think, oh, my neighbors like don't like the police, like really properly don't like the police, and that's gonna matter like so much more than anyone telling them ACAB could ever matter, right?
Yeah. I also want to mention that this particular ship I saw some records, someone found some records and pulled it up about what this ship has been up to. This is a military ship. So this ship has like a whole track record of delivering weapons over for quote unquote Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so again, Palestinian liberation is everyone's liberation, right? If we take down the military industrial complex, this isn't an isolated one issue thing. This is humanity's thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me?
Hey Neil, congrats on being back.
I'm back.
You've come in to tell us about the tenants union. You've burst through from the Black Lodge where you were being detained.
Mule, I miss
so funny
you.
because me and my partner are literally watching Twin Peaks: The Return at the moment, so that's nice. so relevant. Yes, I'm here to tell everyone about the Comrades of the Show segment. So this is exciting because I was part of this. So I guess you didn't hear my most based thing this week, so this can be part of that consolidation prize for that. But basically, Greater Manchester Tenants Union have released a statement in solidarity and support of Palestine, and this comes alongside London Tenants Union, London Renters Union, also expressing solidarity and support for Palestine. And I'll just read it out real quick. Greater Manchester Tenants Union has always fought to uphold the right to safe and secure housing for all. Accordingly, we stand in solidarity with the citizens of Palestine who have endured the loss of their right to a safe home since 1948. We're horrified by the unfolding genocide of the Palestinian people. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian and Israeli life alike, and believe recent events to be a direct consequence of the lifetime of occupation that Palestine has suffered. Destruction on the scale we are seeing can never be justified and must be stopped immediately. We absolutely condemn the lack of humanitarian and medical aid reaching those in Palestine. The actions of the United States and United Kingdom in preventing a humanitarian ceasefire are entirely unjustifiable and unforgivable. We call on all unions, activists, and political groups across the country to continue the fight for the existence and freedom of the Palestinian people, continue to fight against oppression, apartheid, and genocide. As a union, we will encourage and support members to attend all demonstrations in support of Palestine. We demand better from those we have entrusted to represent us in Westminster to uphold the basic human rights of the suppressed and devastated population. We call for an immediate ceasefire, the prevention of a ground invasion, and an end to the occupation of Palestine. Israel cannot be allowed to be an exception to international law. And that's it. That's what it says. That was a good test
Fantastic.
of my new mic, I think.
Yeah.
No.
Hope it sounds good.
Do you want to tell us about your most based thing this week anyway, since you're back now?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. The most based thing that I did this week was, again, connected to housing. I'm something of a housing activist. People might have, if you've seen in the show the things I talk about. But basically, there is a queer squat out here in Manchester, and obviously, I'm not going to say where it is, but I know some of the people there. I've been there a few times, and I've kind of made it my unofficial outreach mission to try and help them defend against a high court eviction warrant that they're currently basically under threat of. So if you're wondering what a high court warrant is for eviction here in the UK, it means the kind of things that we saw in the University of Manchester when the people who were occupying the buildings there were evicted forcefully. These are the people who will get hired, most likely, are that one firm. I can't remember what their name is, but they're absolutely vile and disgusting. And they pride themselves on evicting travelers.
Yeah, they're the ones who are like, we evict the most activists, squatters, and travelers.
Yes, it's that one. And basically what they do, and the police come along with them, and they basically just practice. They send undertrained officers to practice arresting people and putting them away and putting them in vans and stuff. And, that stuff's bad for anyone, but let's be real here. This is a bunch of trans, disabled, queer, homeless people who are extremely vulnerable anyway, being kicked out of the house because they're queer, they don't have anywhere to go.
I just tried to check it, and I made myself really sad because I've just found out how many bailiff services explicitly advertise that they get rid of travelers. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. But yeah, so basically there is a glimmer of hope in terms of what we might be able to do, because obviously the Tenants Union, we have connections with Greater Manchester Law Centre, who are a pretty based free legal aid law firm who try and help us in people who are suffering with housing issues and stuff. But they do a lot of other good work, and at the moment I'm in correspondence with one of our members who works there, and he's basically asking me for a bunch of information from these people in the squat to see if we can actually send a letter to the court and be like, look, here's what's happening. It's on council land. This is a bunch of people who've been failed by the council's homeless service. They're doing things for the community. They're constantly putting on events for the local community. They're involved in a thing called the Queer Food Project, where they feed homeless people anyway. It doesn't, it's not specifically just for queer people, but it's for homeless people all over the place. So fingers crossed that we're gonna have a successful waiver of the warrant, and if that isn't the case, if we can't get that, then the next step is to find out how we can resist an eviction like that as safely and as legally as possible, so that people don't get arrested or put away, or do you know what I mean, charged with anything. So yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and I'm kind of regretting getting involved because it's a lot of extra work. But I think it's for the best, and I think that it really is. Obviously, I say I regret. I really don't regret it. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it is. But what I'm saying is it's complex and it's difficult, and when it comes to land, and this is something that we're quite big on in Red Planet, because Marx he talks about this thing, the enclosure of the commons, and that's why everything is bad. And so when it comes to land, the state will come down on you with the full force that it can. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll let you know what's going down.
It might be worth us talking about how Red Planet is made possible by the support of our patrons.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I mean, well, great minds think alike. So I think that's what happened there. We just both encountered the best possible thought right now, which is to go to patreon.com/red_planet. Just want to briefly remind everyone, like I said, that it's made possible by the direct support of our viewers. We would like to expand the show by hiring an editor. As we are constantly saying, Conrad is a blessing, not just to the specific enterprise of the show, but our lives. It is an honor to know him. And he's made the show so much better, as you've all seen. And like I was saying last week, he currently takes on a lot of editing work. So even besides how much better, another hypothetical, part of the team could be, though they couldn't possibly be as good as Conrad, they will give us more Conrad because he won't be doing the editing. So if you support the show, we're not going to go to all the tiers right now, but even if you support the show at the lowest amount, $2 a month, you will have access to our bonus podcast series, Limited Hangouts. Episode 2 on the Democrats will release this coming week. And when it's done, our upcoming documentary film on the ZAD. So Limited Hangouts is, we mentioned before, it's a kind of little spin-off series about conspiracies. We've had episodes with Mule and Kira, and Conrad and I are the original crew. We'll have another one with Tim soon, and then we're gonna probably rotate around and have some more Red Planet conspiracy chat going on. I really like it. Kira, do you want to tell us about the guests we're about to have on?
Yes, I would love to. So our guest is Michael. I met Michael yesterday at the pro-Palestine protest. The one I was talking about is one of the most basic things I did this week. The one that was organized by the Northwestern University Students for Justice in Palestine. Michael is a member of Jews Against White Supremacy, as well as a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. If you're not familiar with Jewish Voice for Peace, you've probably heard about their org a lot in the news lately. They're the ones that we covered the news story of like a few shows ago when they conducted a massive sit-in at Grand Central Station, and cops had to bring buses to try to arrest them. Just incredibly based and absolute comrades. You love to see it. So everyone, welcome Michael to the show.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me.
Hi
Hey,
Michael.
Michael.
Welcome. It's so cool to have you. Thank you for coming
Great to be
on.
here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just telling everyone about Jewish Voice for Peace, but how would you tell us about Jews Against White Supremacy, because that's the org that you're very much involved with?
Yeah, so I'm involved in both. But Jews Against White Supremacy is a pretty new anti-Zionist group that started just like a couple months ago. And I think it kind of started to fill a gap on the left of a more radical anti-Zionist left position among Jewish organizing. And Jewish Voice for Peace is great, and I still work with them and like inside them and with trying to pull folks left in some degree. And Jews Against White Supremacy believes in a free Palestine from the river to the sea by any means necessary, and Jews organizing as comrades and in solidarity with Palestinians for their liberation. And there's plenty of people in joining right now. We have like a whole lot of new people joining our group, so that's awesome. You don't have to be Jewish to be part of it. There's people who are, some identify as Jewish, some don't. We welcome everyone to be part of Jews Against White Supremacy. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook if you just search Jews Against White Supremacy. Definitely would recommend giving us a follow and sharing our material.
Awesome. Yeah. By all means, use this show to promote the hell out of your group, because it sounds like y'all are super based. Tell me more about what makes Jews Against White Supremacy more radical.
Yeah. I'll just give you like an example. Sometimes there's kind of like this liberal approach to anti-Zionism, which kind of relies on this framework of international law, for example. I kind of push back against that. Like Ghassan Kanafani, who is the leader of the Palestinian Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a Marxist formation in Palestine for Palestinian liberation. He wrote that bourgeois moralism and obedience to international law are the cause of tragedy for the Palestinian people. So Jews Against White Supremacy is trying to take a principled left-wing stance against Zionism. And that's not to say that other groups don't. It's just that's where we're trying to attack from. And we are dedicated to working alongside Palestinians for their liberation. And our goal is to take on and abolish Zionist institutions. That's another factor that I think Jews Against White Supremacy saw on the left, the need for going head on against Jewish Zionist institutions and Christian Zionist institutions, and really any Zionist institutions. So as Jews, we're in a place where we can say that Zionism is not Judaism, that Zionism doesn't represent Jews, and we are in a position alongside Palestinians to push back against the narrative of anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism, for example.
I think it's definitely worthwhile for that to be like a much more radical org out there. You know, when you have like the ADL or other like, you know, hate speech monitors are calling like anti-Zionist groups anti-Semitic. It's like you're yeah, like if you're going to be called anti-Semitic when you're just being kind of having a moderate or liberal approach to anti-Zionism, then you may as well not mess around and like get to the point. Like,
Well, yeah, and one thing, like, thanks, Michael, for mentioning the whole thing about, how there's like there are, there's Christian Zionists, like there's like that's so much of their support base. Like over down here in New Zealand, there's a bunch of like there's like the Israel Institute and there's like the Indigenous Coalition for Israel and all these other groups, and they're majority evangelical Christian organizations. It's like they might have like a single like Jewish board member, and then the rest are like evangelical Christians, and it's like like, and then so in criticizing their members or their administration, people like they'll call you anti-Semitic, and it's like, bro, you're not even Jewish. Like, it's wild. But and the international law thing as well, I think, is a great thing to point out because so we had a Palestinian solidarity rally on Saturday down here. Thousands of people showed up, and it's the biggest one so far that we've had in Auckland. And there was a Labour MP that spoke who has in the past been like an advocate for Palestine. And he gave this really kind of middling kind of both sides speech where he talked about, he was like, like he started off by condemning Hamas and then talking about how like the actions of these Palestinian resistance groups are breaking international law. And it's kind of just like, well, like where has international law been when like Israel has been like running this open air prison in Gaza?
There's no real enforcement of international law. And who wrote international law? Mostly Western states, colonial states. So whose interest is it to try and like condemn people according to international law?
Laws ultimately are justification for state violence, and we're seeing that it's applied very much in that same manner. Like, here are these laws, and then we apply them when we want to justify our violence. And even when even if we want to commit acts of violence, we don't really even need them justified. But when like Hamas does a single thing, all of a sudden now international law this, international law that.
Yeah.
I also feel similarly to you with, and I'm never going to say this at these protests, but like when certain chants like occupation is a crime, things like that. I'm always like very wary about using this types of terminology to like
an appeal to law or something like that.
Yeah, it's like
right?
It's against the laws of the West. Like it's okay, but who cares though? Ultimately,
what do you mean you're experiencing genocide? That's illegal.
Yeah, it's wrong because the king said it was wrong to do that. Basically,
Jim Crow was legal. All those laws were legal. Like like in Nazi Germany, like locking up Jews, that was legal. And it's the same thing with, like when a lot of people talk about human rights and things like
I was
just
going to mention that. Another related framework that's kind of a liberal framework is human rights. Like, we're trying to achieve Palestinian human rights. And in a way, it's problematic for a few reasons. One is like, we're giving them human rights or something. It's like, that's problematic in its own sense. And the other thing that's problematic, I think, about the human rights framework is this idea of like, okay, so you get the right to vote, maybe. Is that liberation? Right? It's not necessarily liberation. Look at South Africa, for example. In South Africa, the end of apartheid did not mean the end of colonialism per se. It didn't mean the end of inequality between white and Black South Africans. It didn't necessarily mean land back. Right. So my position is like land back. I'm coming at this also from my experience at Standing Rock and my experience as a water protector. So that's kind of where my perspective comes in mostly.
Based.
A huge demographic of support for Palestinian struggle over here is with Maori and Pacifica people, and a lot of our historic kind of like land marches and even like even going back further than that to people that protested against South African apartheid in New Zealand. There was like a gigantic whole thing with like the Springbok rugby tour back in the day. It was like one of our iconic kind of memories of protests. And these are like the same people that are, like rallying for Palestine, and it's the same people that have, the same people that were involved with like Standing Rock and all this kind of stuff. And it's like that's the reality, is that it is one struggle, and there's like a through line for all of these things. This is something that a lot of people have talked about. A lot of the books that we've recommended on stream, like How to Blow Up a Pipeline and things like that. That's the name of the book for any, CIA, GCSB agents or whatever listening. The name of the book is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And, there's like this common thread where it's like, it like links it obviously to the greater economic system. It links it to, like the petrochemical billionaires and the climate crisis and stuff like that. Like it's all one struggle. And I think that there's a huge I think kind of rhetorical thing with Israel where they're trying to obfuscate that, right? And there's like this idea of like Zionism as being the like that's the indigenous, like those, right, they're the land back guys and stuff like that. But,
yeah, it's very twisted. It's inverted. But it's also something that we see in the United States context, and really in any settler colonial context, where the settlers have the intention of replacing the indigenous people. And one of the ways that they try to do that is by claiming indigeneity, and claiming, for example, in the U.S. context, claiming that, it's like the white settlers, the white Christian settlers have this right to the land because they're closer to God or something, and they have this right to like redeem the land and redeem the wilderness. All of this stuff, which is in any settler colonial context, has been used as justification in Zionism and in Americanism and American settler colonialism too. But with Zionism trying to pretend like it's an indigenous movement because Jews once lived in Palestine. Well, there's a lot of factors to that argument, but one of them is that there's Palestinian Jews. There's Jews who are Palestinian who don't like Zionism at all. They never wanted Zionism, and they've lived in Jerusalem and other parts of Palestine before Zionism, and they got along very well with Muslim and Christian Palestinians.
Yeah. This is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss. I know he's from the Troy Carter, and they're quite problematic in some of their views. But
to be honest, I actually defend them. I think that they're part of this too. Like, there's a misconception that like ultra-Orthodox anti-Zionist Jews are only anti-Zionist because of some obscure theological reason. But no, they have a moral compass that they care about Palestinian lives and they want Palestinian liberation too.
I've heard Cheryl Vikal, who's like been a great voice on this. She's a Jewish lawyer based in the States, and she wrote an open letter to her fellow Jews talking about something called Sinat Chinam. Am I saying that right? It's from the Talmud or something. It's like Jews were initially like kicked out of the temple, supposedly in the scriptures.
Oh, baseless hatred.
Baseless hatred, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's covered, right? It's covered in the scriptures. It's there. This kind of like, and it's vile. I don't know if we spoke about this too much on our. We did a whole episode where we covered the whole history of the occupation and Zionism and stuff like this, but I don't know if we mentioned it too much. But like, the grandfathers of Zionism, like Theodor Herzl, Max Nordau. This was covered in Eli Valley's book, who is a prominent anti-Zionist Jewish cartoonist, and he quotes some of them, and they say some of the most anti-Semitic things, right? Some
Absolutely.
of the most vile anti-Semitic things,
right? The original Zionist founders blamed Jews for anti-Semitism. Basically, they said that, like Herzl, for example, blamed Jews for anti-Semitism in Europe, and said, essentially that wherever Jews go, there's going to be anti-Semitism because the Jews themselves bring it with them. And so therefore we need just our own little piece of land, and we can't integrate or be part of other communities or other people. Right. So, Zionism and Judaism are really not the same thing. They're diametrically opposed.
Yeah, there's one thing that like I only realized that like a lot of people don't actually know about, which is something that I've read a bit about before. But the someone I was thinking about it yesterday because someone sent me this thing on Twitter, like this, it's like one of those like little Zionist gotcha things, and this guy sent me this thing saying when Europeans went to America, they didn't find ancient manuscripts of Shakespeare because they were colonizers. Jews in Israel find ancient manuscripts written in Hebrew, the same language they speak today, describing the same rituals they observe because they're indigenous. And it's like, okay, cool. So obviously, like, this person has no idea about the history of Israel because so the Zionist project had like it was like a distinct effort to create like the new Hebrew man, like to revive, to like create this this new Hebrew culture. There's a good book I posted about it, which is funny because it's written by an Israeli dude at the University of Tel Aviv, and he wrote about it from an Israeli perspective, being like, yes, I want to, like catalog our history and our creation of this culture sort of thing. And a lot of people were like, this is anti-Zionist. And he's like, what? No, So it's this book, Becoming Hebrew, The Creation of a Jewish National Culture in Ottoman Palestine by Arya Bruce Saposnik. And it's like, like there's like this very factual account of them being like, okay, so we need to create a unified national identity of like this strong new Jewish culture. And so there was an effort to discourage people from speaking like Yiddish and everything like that, and bring back Hebrew as a language, which was, until that point, it was like a thing that was only really mainly used for like ritual and stuff. And it actually discouraged the Palestinian Jews and all the other Jews in the area that all spoke Hebrew. They were kind of like, man, like they've taken this from us and we don't want to speak it anymore. So, it's like this kind of thing where they erased all these other unique Jewish cultures, or tried to erase these little, like these pockets of different kinds of Jews that all lived in the area to create this unified identity, which is like something that, like a lot of has happened in a lot of other, I would say, like national liberation struggles. We saw this with like even in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and we've seen this in a lot of like, like Africa and stuff like that. And like there was like I do remember some quotes from Fanon like at the time where he was like, "This is part of their kind of like there's this idea of creating this national identity towards liberation sort of thing." But obviously Fanon, didn't actually see what was happening. Well, like what came after this or whatever. But so it's like this interesting thing where it's like there's this idea that people think like this is the continuation of a culture that was always here. And it's like, no, this was the deliberate recreation of something by people like, like there was this like culture that it kept evolving with all these other people, these cultures and these ethnicities that came through. And these guys came in and they were like, we want to wind it back to this point and we're going to recreate from there. So it's like, no wonder they're speaking the same language and doing the same rituals of the people from hundreds of years ago, because it's like they deliberately set it up to be that way, like this isn't like, this isn't an indigenous, like an unbroken string, this is like, a very deliberate thing.
I would say firstly that like regardless, no matter what claim Zionists make to indigeneity in Palestine, it doesn't matter because Palestinians have experienced Zionism as colonialism because it is colonialism.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what justification or what the Zionist project could uncover Hebrew from 2,000 years ago. It doesn't make Zionism any less colonial.
Yeah. Right. I said this to a friend this morning, actually.
Sorry, Tim. Yeah, it's kind of like if English people living in England said, oh, actually we come from Turkey, like Caucasian people come from Turkey. So, we need a home in Turkey. It's just absurd. It's completely absurd.
When Italy invades the UK and says, like, right. Look, Temple Station, we were here first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we were here 1,000 years ago. So, now we've got to kill you all.
Yeah, I was talking about this with a friend earlier today, actually, the idea that it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like they could have a legitimate claim to indigeneity or whatever like that. The reality is, it's like they are, like they are occupying this land. They are keeping these people and opening a prison.
They openly called themselves the Jewish colonization, use that term, in the beginning decades of Zionism. They very proudly, openly embraced, obviously, the British and then America more as their patrons, and so colonialism runs right through it entirely. Another thing about Judaism is that it's a moral religion. It's not about that kind of staking an ethno-national claim to land. That's just another misconception of where some people think Zionism and Judaism are similar or overlap or whatever. But there's a scholar named Mark Ellis who said, and I think this is like an apt description, he said that the Jewish indigenous is the prophetic tradition, which is a moral tradition. It's not about being indigenous to land in the same way that Palestinians or Native Americans are. And Jewish tradition is about the prophetic, which is standing up for social justice. That's really the core of Judaism. So that's why another reason why I say that Judaism and Zionism are diametrically opposed.
Yeah, some of the most active anti-Zionists and supporters of Palestinian nationhood and liberation that I've known over the last sort of 20-something years that I've known about what's happening have been Jewish, they've been anti-Zionist Jews. And there's a bunch of organizations in Auckland, and when I lived over in Australia, there's even just on an individual level, a lot of the I have a few Israeli friends and acquaintances who are all once they've moved out of Israel and come back to the rest of the world, they've had an awakening and they've been like, oh shit, okay, so
Michael, tell us sort of if you're cool to do this, what your own personal journey with anti-Zionism was like. What kind of led you? You've mentioned that Judaism is not it's completely antithetical to Zionism. And my step family are all Jewish, and I kind of understand just how deep and insidious the Zionist line goes. Mm-hmm. So if you could talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So when I was younger, I would say in my late teens, early 20s, I wasn't very involved in politics, and I kind of just considered myself a liberal, and I considered myself oh yeah, I'm against the occupation, but maybe a two-state solution is the answer. Increasingly over time, I became more radical, and what really cemented it for me was going to Standing Rock. Right outside the front of Oshedi Sako in the camp at Standing Rock, there's a sign that said, "From Palestine to Standing Rock, we are united," and there was a Palestinian flag. And there were Palestinian folks there that I met, and there was talk of Palestine and the connections. And I realized I need to be consistent. I need to be in solidarity with indigenous people here and indigenous people all over the world, including Palestine. And I could see that this is also when I started to learn about U.S. settler colonialism as a structure and a system. And so I made the connection as well there. Okay, so U.S. settler colonialism has inflicted untold pain and suffering and oppression on Native Americans and on Black Americans, and Zionism has inflicted the same thing on Palestinians. So
Can I just say that like it's so refreshing and obviously heartbreaking, but refreshing as well to see so many Black people immediately be able to recognize what's going on. Like they're like, this, I've seen this shit before, obviously in a different way, but not really. Like it's chilling how universal this shit is, but it's also really powerful in that it does mean that this is our struggle together. This isn't one little pocket of a struggle, another little pocket, and they have, I guess, something to do with each other. Maybe this is one big struggle. Anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I really appreciate you pointing that out.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons I think that my group is called Jews Against White Supremacy, because we're fighting all forms of white supremacy, including Zionism. So that's we're going against white supremacy here in Turtle Island and around the world and in Palestine. And so, so I went to Standing Rock. That's where the connection really got cemented for me of like, okay, I need to be in full solidarity with Palestinian people, just like I tried to be in solidarity with indigenous people here. After that, I started organizing with Jewish Voice for Peace. In 2017 to 2018, I was part of JVP Chicago. And so I did various things with them, like teaching at or kind of doing educational work at a Teachers for Social Justice fair and just various other organizing with JVP. I moved to New York in 2018 to go to graduate school, and I was part of JVP New York for 2 years. And then I came back here to where I am now is outside of Chicago when the pandemic started. And in the last year, I've become more active with JVP again, JVP Chicago, and now with Jews Against White Supremacy. But in my so my graduate degree was sociology. And I studied sociology because of my experiences at Standing Rock and my other kind of radicalization experiences with politics. So that's what brought me to sociology. And when I did my sociology degree, I did a independent study with a professor specifically about settler colonialism in Palestine. So I really studied it from many angles. In my journey, my kind of first protest was actually I happened to be in Baltimore. I was traveling in 2015, and I happened to be in Baltimore during the uprising after the cops who killed Freddie Gray were acquitted. And so I joined the protests there, and that's like my first introduction to like protests and stuff. And then in 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders volunteer organizer for like 6 months, and I like went all over the country with some friends, and from there I just kept moving left.
That guy lately.
Yeah.
I was trying not to complain about him because I know we had a lot of news to go through, but then you brought him up. Fuck Bernie Sanders.
That's how I kind of started to get radicalized.
He served a purpose, and his purpose is over.
Pretty much. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think he has seen from the some of the people, because I think Jewish Voice for Peace have actually like sat in his office. They've done a sit-in in his office. And I think he has actually like asked for like a smidge of a ceasefire. Like I think he actually did that this week. But again, it's this kind of like, it's not enough. And how do you, I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect that like, people are getting on to these like, politicians that have these quote unquote radical ideas like healthcare, and then when the establishment crushes them unforgivingly, people then become radicalized. So okay, that's really interesting. So yeah, you got radicalized by that. You were doing that for 6 months, and what were you doing? Like just knocking on doors, or?
I was doing knocking on doors. I was recruiting volunteers to go knock on doors or to come into the offices and make phone calls or other things. I was mostly recruiting other volunteers. And I went with two of my really good friends that we bonded so much through that experience. And then one of those friends and me were the ones who with a couple other people, went to Standing Rock after, because we were just keeping in touch and we're like, look at what's going on. We saw like the attack dogs from the security forces attacking water protectors, and we're like, we should just go. So we went in late 2016. I think we got there for that. I was there for the first 3 weeks of November in 2016, and then I was there for 3 weeks in January and February 2017, when everyone was evicted by the police from that area.
I was just thinking about how your story mirrors that of there's like so many people I know, particularly Jewish people and Israeli people who went through the same kind of like really similar stories of I guess like radicalization. Yeah, it's and yeah, there's so many, or like even there's people I know who have even described like not even really knowing about like the history of Israel, but not knowing anything about like the real history of it until getting to like university or like around that age or even a little bit later. Yeah, like even there's an org in New Zealand called DANU, New Zealand Jews Against Occupation, and they're founded by, it's like a girl and her mother. And so I think she was like one of the main founders, Abigail, was like in her late 20s, but her mom was like, I don't know, she was like in her like 50s or something like that when they kind of like, kind of had this like realization that they were just like, oh wow, like holy shit, like, there's something going on here that we didn't even really know about. And and then they founded this org together and kind of have started, and they're like a really like a significant voice in New Zealand, like Jewish protest, and they like work hand in hand with the Palestinian youth organizations, and like, like they run a restaurant, and they often, like host these events and stuff. They've been doing it for years before like the current event and stuff, and have totally been kind of pushed out from the New Zealand Israeli community, like the heavily Zionist kind of like influenced New Zealand Israeli and Jewish communities as well, which is like really really interesting. But it's not something that is kind of, I guess, like taught to, like younger kids growing up or anything like that. It's kind of like it requires this little bit of like self-interrogation or being out in the world and kind of like, and I mean, I think that's the same with like, there's like a lot of kind of state indoctrination in any country, like, like in America or like in New Zealand and the UK and all this kind of stuff. It's just that I think like the kind of the Zionist propaganda machine just does not sleep, like it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So Michael, tell us a little bit about Jews Against White Supremacy and what their sort of like prospective actions are. Well, what kind of prospective actions are being planned? If you can tell us, obviously, if you can't, don't worry about it. About the current situation in Gaza.
So, in terms of like protesting that's going on, Jews Against White Supremacy has endorsed the DC protest on Saturday. Was one of the endorsers, and the group is actively sending our members to protests all around the world. We have a branch just opened in Brazil.
And y'all just started this group like somewhat recently.
I want to say that it started in like August or July.
That's amazing. Hell yeah.
I found out about it in August, I think, like end of August or so. And I thought like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll check them out and like them on Facebook, and then like realized later like, oh, this is like where it's at for me. Like, this is my type of organization. And so one of the things that we are working on and we're going to do more of, so you probably saw that the ADL, the Brandeis Center, and then there's this Hawley Senate resolution, which were all very similar things, attacking SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, across like 200 universities in Turtle Island. And so Jews Against White Supremacy, we've put out a statement defending SJPs from those attacks, those like baseless claims of anti-Semitism and making Jewish students feel threatened and feel unsafe and all of that BS. We've put out a statement condemning the ADL for that. So yeah, I would say the ADL is kind of an adversary of ours that we're trying to push back against. So they did that, and then we pushed back against that, and we are also going to continue to reach out to SJP chapters and national SJP to share with them like how we stand our solidarity with them and whatever we can do to stand by their side while they face these attacks and these accusations. That's one aspect of our organizing that I'm excited about personally.
Can I interject real quick? And just to connect the dots for all of our audience, SJP is Students for Justice in Palestine, and that's where I met Michael. I met Michael at a protest held by Northwestern University SJP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're going to be basically focusing on calling out organizations like the ADL. And I assume the media for these absurd, baseless claims of anti-Semitism, sorry, other stuff you were gonna mention?
Well, it's important because like I think the ADL is a one of the ways it's been described, which I agree with, is it's an Israel lobby with a civil rights hobby.
Nice,
right?
Yeah, cool, yeah.
So. That's basically what the ADL is. And so they claim to be progressive. They claim to be liberal. They claim to be fighting against hate and discrimination and all of that. And they're trying to do all of that while being 100% pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, and attacking anyone who stands up against Zionism, whether it's SJP or Jewish Voice for Peace.
I mean, even historically, they're pro-white South African apartheid.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
They spied on South African Black South African activists. They claim to speak for Jews. They claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Like they very clearly state that in their website. They have a whole thing about anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And it's like one of the reasons that Jews Against White Supremacy exists is so that we can go up against those Zionist institutions like the ADL and just simply say, no, you're wrong. We're Jewish. We're anti-Zionist. We're proud to be Jewish. We love ourselves. We're not self-hating, right? All of those things. And we're anti-Zionist because Zionism and Judaism are not the same thing and they're opposed to each other. So by putting that message out there, we can kind of drive a wedge and like, there's still people, unfortunately, who think of the ADL as this progressive organization or like as this like fighting hate organization. So
they've done a really good job marketing themselves. I'll tell you that.
So by, I think, exposing that, we're trying to, like I kind of said before, the Jews Against White Supremacy exists to try to abolish Zionist institutions in the Jewish community and in the larger community. And ADL is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I feel like the ADL has, with a lot of support from American cultural imperialism, like really gotten positioned as like a progressive resource because they're in charge of so much of like the in charge of still makes it sound too official, but it's like given a lot of credence in like the authorizing of knowledge with regards to hate speech. Like a lot of the people who are becoming politically aware around that same like Bernie era, or like, becoming anti-fascist because of Trump, like, saw the ADL as, like maybe you would have heard of the ADL first as like somewhere where there's a website where you've got like a log of the hate symbols you can learn about and what the Nazis are doing and this stuff. And then like, it's able to sneak in a really like innocuous way.
Absolutely.
I like that, the with a civil rights hobby. That's very funny.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people instinctively support the ADL because, in the past when they've spoken out against like, alt-right groups and stuff like that. And then it's like funny to see some of these like, like these far-right people that have in the past said that like, the ADL is just like some Soros shill or something like that. And now they're just like, well, no, see, they say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. It's just like, fuck off,
Well, I specifically remember doing a live stream once because I've been following the Palestinian struggle for a long time, and I thought, oh, it's time to educate my, viewers on what Zionism is, and you know, and I actually use the ADL, and this might just be ADHD brain gone wrong. I don't remember it correctly or something, but I seem to specifically remember at this point in time, it was like when I very, very early started doing politics streaming. It might have been 2017, 2018. And I feel like on the ADL website, it had a definition where it said, yeah, you know, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, but also conflating the actions of Israel with Jews everywhere, like is actually anti-Semitism. And I'm like, how does that even work? It's like hypocrisy straight away. And then also because, you know, they're saying that like Israel is Jewish self-determination. Anyway, I might have got this completely wrong, but I know that they edit things quite a lot, and a lot of times like they have like Mondo Vice, for example. Mondo Vice is a publication.
That's where I heard about Jews against white supremacy.
Right, there you go. Yeah, that's how based Mondo Vice are. Yeah, Mondo Vice are really good. I go to them for everything.
Okay, that's good to know. That makes me impress with them even more. Cool.
Yeah, and Mondo Vice are really, really good. And like, if you go onto the ADL website to look up Mondo Vice, there's a mention of them in this one article, or maybe they have like another article about it where they say, oh, this one guy who's like a definite Holocaust denier, like gave them a load of money once. And I was looking up this guy and I was trying to find out where he'd said that the Holocaust didn't happen and stuff. And I couldn't find it. He very well may be a Holocaust denier. I think his name is like Ray Unz or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know this guy. Yeah.
I've heard about this controversy, with Mondo Vice, But they actually returned the money.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
They returned the money because of that.
Yeah. Anyway, I had a thought I was going to complete about that, but which is basically that, you know, the ADL is just like this absolutely like going into overdrive thing. And that is why it's so important to basically, I guess, like as Jewish people to turn around and be like, look, this is not how it works. And I did want to go into on top of that, because there is actually like a broader rise of anti-Semitism that is being reported on, like we're talking legit anti-Semitism here. For example, everyone's seen, I think, that footage of Russian people in Dagestan, quote unquote, hunting Jews, you know, actually like, you know, trying to find Jewish people coming in on a flight from Israel. And we've also seen synagogues attacked in North Africa and stuff like that. Michael, tell us like a little bit about how you feel about the overall rise in anti-Semitism, and like, you know, just sort of like tell us, I guess, how you feel as a Jewish person, like about this and about how it's being massively conflated with the Palestinian liberation movement as a whole.
Absolutely. Well, I would say again that, you know, as Jews, our struggle is against white supremacy. As people, our struggle is against white supremacy. Anti-Semitism is part and parcel of white supremacy. So, you know, there's the actual anti-Semitic incidents that have been rising along with white supremacy in this country and around the world. And then there's somewhat of a conflation that like the ADL and other organizations will put out, like, oh, there's so many pro-Palestine rallies. See the rise in anti-Semitism, you know, and that's obviously BS. Anti-Semitism is a real issue, obviously, and it is a part of white supremacy. So we have to tackle it as a whole. We have to tackle white supremacy as a whole, including anti-Semitism. I don't feel any less safe right now as a Jew than I did before October 7th. I think that's complete nonsense. The idea that like Jews in America are now like less safe because of October 7th is nonsense. There's definitely some Zionists who feel that way, but and you know, there's like, I saw this thing that I thought, it's like sad, but it's like someone posted something like, you know, every time Israel drops bombs on Gaza now, I'm seeing things of like, hey, you should check in with your Jewish friends to see if they're okay. And it's like, you know, I would say that Zionist feelings are not as important as Palestinians' lives. So, like, we can just disregard Zionist feelings, which is not to say that there isn't real anti-Semitism out there. But when we get clear about what really is anti-Semitism, and when we get clear about the difference between Judaism and Zionism, and the difference between anti-Zionism, principled anti-Zionism, and anti-Semitism, that actually, I think, makes Jews safer in a way.
Right.
To get clear on that makes Jewish people safer, because if there was anyone out there who is conflating what Israel does with all Jewish people, now they can understand, oh, it's actually not the same. It's actually, you can be mad at Israel, you can be mad at Zionism and angry and everything, and not project that onto Jewish people.
I was talking to my mom the other day. I was having the hard talk about Israel. I'm Greek, and Israel made the mistake of bombing a 2,000-year-old Greek Orthodox church in Gaza. And listen, Greeks, my people can be quite racist, right? However, you don't mess with their Greek Orthodox churches. Then they will start to be like, so she was very upset. And then I talked to her more about the atrocity. She was very upset. And then she started saying, so the Jews are doing this and the Jews are doing that. And I was like, okay, I need to stop you, because this is that propaganda that is so deeply harmful. If someone is correctly understands the situation of like the absolute atrocities and just horrors that Israel is conducting right now. Yeah. And any human being is going to feel that, right? Yeah. And then you also fall into the trap of being surrounded by that Israeli propaganda that tells you this is the will of the Jewish people. This is what Jewish freedom and safety is.
Right.
You will be very logically, given those facts, or not facts, but seemingly facts, you will be logically led to a conclusion that is anti-Semitic. Right. And so, like, I absolutely agree with you that that education can only do and can only be like only keep Jewish people safer. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm really interested in what you think that people that aren't Jewish can be doing to help, strengthen your position here.
I think that any non-Jewish, non-Palestinian person should be just in full solidarity with Palestinians, period, for their liberation. So that means BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Movement, bdsmovement.net, and you can find which targeted organizations and companies are being boycotted by BDS. So support BDS, follow Palestinian voices on social media and uplift their voices. You definitely don't have to be Jewish to be like saying that Zionism and Judaism aren't the same things. You can be non-Jewish and do that. There's Christians who are Christians against Zionism or Christians against Christian Zionism, which is important. First and foremost, uplift Palestinian voices, support Palestinian people, and do what you know to do to stand in solidarity with them. Whether you're Jewish, not Jewish, whatever, it doesn't matter.
So just to go back to the conflation of the supposed self-determination of Jews that is enabled by Israel, being anti-Semitic itself, and how that actually hurts Jewish people in the diaspora, and also in Israel. Let's face it, because I've always kind of seen it like this. I've always, in terms of understanding the way that like Israel communicates to Jewish people everywhere. Like I mentioned before that my stepfamily are Jewish. My Jewish brother's wedding, which was like fairly Orthodox, but not super Orthodox, basically had a Zionist rabbi do the ceremony, and he used the opportunity because there were pro-Palestinian marches going on at the time in 2021. He used the opportunity at the wedding to say, what we're seeing currently at the moment is another reason why Jews are not safe in Europe still. And that fucked me up so hard, because I know that if my Jewish family went to Israel as settlers, they do not become civilians, right? Because this is an active occupation. They are lied to. They're told it's your right to come here. It's your destiny to come here. If you stay in the diaspora, you'll be assimilated. You're nothing. You have no land underneath your feet, etc. And then they go there and they settle. They're radicalized. They're given weapons. And if they're not radicalized and given weapons, they're still put and housed in places near Gaza and near the West Bank in the hopes that their like love of Palestinians will like correct them, because then they'll get attacked or whatever. Do you know what I mean by Hamas or the scary brown people basically? And to me that feels, it's always felt as the most dangerous thing for Jewish people. Yeah. Just that like manipulation and then subsequent endangerment, right? Because it is like if you're gonna see Palestinians as this like scary force to be reckoned with, and they're, oh my god, they're gonna kill everyone, they're gonna kill all the Jewish people in the world. Obviously that's all bollocks, but like if that's how you see it, and then you're putting like Jewish people in that actual conflict, not as soldiers but as civilians, that's fucked. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. Zionism presents itself as this idea of Jewish safety, Jewish freedom, Jewish liberation. That's how it's always been. It's always presented itself as that. The idea that Jews can get free while Black folks aren't free, Native Americans aren't free, indigenous people all around the world, people of color all around the world, people in the global South aren't free, Palestinians aren't free. The idea that anyone could get free and at the expense of other people, or even just without other people, is fundamentally false. The only way that there's going to be freedom and liberation for Jews is if there's liberation and freedom for Palestinians. That's the only way. And for all indigenous and people of color and all oppressed people in the world. So, in the Jewish community, there's always been left-wing voices that have always said that our freedom is intertwined and bound up with the freedom of all peoples. So there's no getting free on our own. And Zionism is like, no, we're just going to get free on our own. And we're going to do it at the expense of Palestinians. And at the expense of more than just Palestinians, Black South Africans, people all over the world that Israel ships arms to, and weapons and surveillance and technology and stuff like that.
This is what makes Zionism like fundamentally white supremacist, right? It's the idea that you as a people can only find quote unquote freedom if you do it on the backs of others. That necessarily you cannot have a simultaneous like universal freedom of all people, that necessarily the brown people, the Black people, etc., need to be lower so you can have your safety and your freedom.
Right.
I wanted to ask if you know with Jews Against White Supremacy as an org, but you can also answer just for yourself, like what organizations and like organizers inspire you?
There's so many people that inspire me. I mentioned Ghassan Kanafani before, Palestinian leader of the Popular Front. There's people in the Jewish community. There's Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb. She's been a voice for Palestinian freedom for a long time. And she's rooted in Judaism so much. And she's doing anti-Zionist work, and she's been doing it for a long time. She's an inspiration to me.
Well, that sounds like that touches on this. You keep on saying about like Zionism is inherently opposed to Judaism, which like I agree. I was curious about your like spiritual understanding of that, if that's coming from like a religious and spiritual place.
Yeah, it's partly a religious and spiritual. Like one of the things I learned at Standing Rock was that the struggle is spiritual and is more than just political material. There is that, of course, the politics and the material struggle, of course. And I'm a socialist. I'm a revolutionary socialist. I think that dialectical materialism is extremely useful as a tool. And there's something spiritual about the struggle as well, which is something I learned at Standing Rock, and it's something I find as my anti-Zionism is rooted in my Judaism, if that makes sense. So
Well, to me, yes, but could you elaborate on it?
Marek Edelman, the leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, one of the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, said to be a Jew is to be always with the oppressed, never with the oppressor. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
And so there's something about being Jewish for me personally that is a moral imperative to always be with the oppressed and never with the oppressor. And that's what causes me to be in solidarity with Palestinians and with any oppressed people anywhere on this planet. But I mean, it's also just because I'm a human being, not just
right.
Jewish.
It's not simple,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Throughout all of this, like the more and more I learn about Jewish culture and Judaism, the more I'm like floored at how cool it is. Like there's so many incredibly beautiful lessons that I've been learning from Jewish people, and like I'm just blown away over and over and over again. Like for instance, right now in the West Bank, Israel, or at least Israeli settlers, and accompanied by the IOF that's making sure they can do it safely, is burning down groves of olive trees planted by Palestinians. And by the way, each of these olive trees, if I remember correctly, takes I think 30 years to start bearing fruits. So they're just burning to the ground, not just food, not just livelihood, but like indigenous species, right?
Yeah.
Of plants, and also just like history and labor and just like roots, like literal and figurative roots.
I was reading about this just like before the stream, actually. 1.5 million trees have been uprooted, like as part of the, it's like the forced kind of desertification of certain areas. Like 1.5 million trees. Like that's, when you think about how
that's wild.
Long trees live for, and like this is like the Maori kind of thing coming out, but it's like what, and especially in these areas, like what these trees have like bore witness to over the years. It's like 1.5 million trees is like,
and there's actually in Judaism, the religion of Judaism, in the Torah, which is the foundation of Judaism, there is a teaching that even in times of war, you should never destroy a fruit tree.
Yeah, I was about to mention.
I thought you maybe were going to say that, Kira. Yeah. So like that's just one example of how Zionism does not follow Judaism, does not correspond with Judaism. They're burning fruit trees. Olive trees are fruit trees, whatever. The point is that, you can go straight back to Jewish religion to find the opposition to Zionism and the Zionist act.
If I might add my commentary, like at the most fundamental level, right? It's like the story of the guy who asked the more traditionalist rabbi to explain all of Judaism to him while he stands on one leg. Yeah. And the traditionalist was like, no, that's an insult to my culture. And then he asked Hillel, and Hillel said, if something is hateful to you, then don't do it to someone else. Yeah. The rest is all commentary. And it's like when the Zionist project keeps on evoking genocide to explain why it should exist and then does genocide, it's just the most basic. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Just to quickly circle back, the thing that you mentioned about the fruit trees, and how it's against Judaism in the Torah to destroy them. And the lesson that somebody on Blue Sky told me this, and they said, as an Alamnik, I am forced to point out that this act of burning down the olive trees is always explicitly contrary to Jewish law and practice in the world over. This is in the Torah. Jews are not allowed to destroy fruit trees or any other natural resource that is of universal benefit to humankind. And I'm like, it's not just like something in scripture, something that says like, don't do this, right? It's just like, it's a really incredible lesson of basically communism, basically just being like, these are public goods. They're from the earth. Don't destroy them because you're destroying the community's ability to thrive together. Right. Like for the public good. And I just thought that there's so many cool lessons I've been learning lately. It's been really beautiful.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're finding beauty and wisdom in it. I mean, I think that, no religion is perfect. Judaism has its problematic aspects. The Torah has problematic aspects to it for sure. So like I don't personally find like, oh, if the scripture says it, then it's the way to go 100%. And if it, and like whatever, I think it's a valuable and important spiritual resource and religious resource, but it's not like, yeah, there's definitely still some problematic things in the Torah, in the Bible, but yeah, the core of it, like you said, Sophie, the core of it is like that Hillel teaching that what's hateful to you, don't do unto others. That's the core of every major religion: Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, Buddhism, etc., etc. They all are based upon that golden rule, if you will. And yeah, it's something simple about being human. That golden rule is,
surely,
even if you're not religious, spiritual, whatever, live by that rule. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the, thoroughly mentioned rise in anti-Semitism as a relation to pro-Palestinian protests growing in popularity, and how you don't feel any less safe, as a result of this, because it's interesting to see what things that Israel likes to talk about in terms of anti-Semitism. And there were, in 2017, there were a bunch of Nazis, like actual Nazis, actual neo-Nazis, self-described white supremacist people, marching through a park in Charlottesville saying Jews shall not replace us. And this is a widely known issue, in terms of like, what it's a widely known event. Not only did it kill people, but it also, was commented on by then President Donald J. Trump, on how those people were very fine people. And in terms of fighting fascism in general, what is Jews Against White Supremacy sort of like thinking about in terms of like stuff, not related to the Palestinian conflict, like stuff related to like actual, anti-Semitic fascism, conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxer stuff?
That's a great question. I mean, it's all connected, right? So I feel like our fight against Zionism is our fight against white supremacy and vice versa. Jews Against White Supremacy really is a global thing now, but just for like in Turtle Island or America, the United States, like, or in Europe, and the rise in white supremacy goes hand in hand with the rise in anti-Semitism, because like I said before, anti-Semitism is a part of white supremacy. So yeah, like the Trumps and the marchers in Charlottesville, those are a threat, an actual threat to Jewish people, although even they are on their last leg, in my opinion, and they're going to fall soon. And I'm not really too worried about them either. They're going.
Hell yeah.
As Woody Guthrie said, all you fascists are bound to lose. So
it's true. Yeah, it's really nice to hear that, because I fundamentally believe it too. In some of the marches in Manchester, where I'm based in the UK, there've been people who've been worried about anti-vaxxers, sort of like clutching on to the protest and stuff like that. And that's kind of been my answer as well. Like the thing is with fascists is that they don't understand solidarity, right? And they can mobilize things, but it really takes quite a lot of mobilization in order to get there. And for example, now, in fact, I think like the sort of like support that the white supremacist West is giving Israel is now like a very sort of like, I guess it's not funny in general, but it's funny to see how fascists are responding to it, because lots of like, fascists who like, of course they hate Jews as much as they hate brown people, or anyone who's not white.
And they love Zionism.
Right, exactly. And
they hate Jews and love Zionism for the same reason.
Yes.
And they hate people of color and love Zionism for the same reason. As soon as they find the wrong type of Jew, an anti-Zionist, anti-white supremacist, anti-capitalist Jew, then that's when you're going to see their true colors.
Right. You're absolutely right. In terms of the mobilization and how they can like try and like gain clout from this, gain clout in terms of like their own organizations and how they feel about this in particular. I think number one, they're a bit scared of how popular pro-Palestinian protests are and how massive they are and how this is like a huge movement that is exponentially growing, actually. And then also that is like attached to the fact that again, they are like fundamentally like, you know, they want to support Zionism, so they're scared to publicly do this.
Right.
And also maybe they don't care about it that much as well. They're like, whatever, you know, we'd rather just attack.
So there's different like varying degrees of how white supremacists respond to Zionism and to everything that's going on. And most white supremacists are just like pro-Zionist. It's pretty simple for them. But there are examples, it's not common, but it does happen, of neo-Nazis trying to infiltrate pro-Palestine movements. And so that's why I was talking before about getting clarity on like the difference between Judaism and Zionism, the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. When we are educated and have clarity about that, then it's much easier for people to tell Nazis to fuck off from Palestinian marches or Palestinian whatever if they're trying to infiltrate.
It's also good for preventing people from trying to shame you out of supporting Palestinians, because you don't want to hurt Jewish people with your so-called anti-Semitism, which
right.
A lot of us have been experiencing a lot of that pressure from people.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that Palestinians in general have a extremely sharp analysis of anti-Semitism and know the difference between actual anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Like, for example, at the DC March, there was a anti-Zionist, anti-fascist Jewish Muslim contingent that met during the DC March. So like that type of solidarity and building that type of solidarity is what we can do to kind of like push back against those rare instances where a white supremacist or a fascist is trying to infiltrate pro-Palestine movements. And, you know, it has happened that people hide behind this quote unquote anti-Zionism, that they are actually anti-Semites and they hate Jews and whatever, and they're just using this as a cover. And so we do have to be on guard against that. It's not common, to be honest. I don't think it's the average. I think the average white supremacist is just pro-Zionist and like pro-Israel, but it can happen. And so if we have clarity and are educated about it, we can deal with it better, and we can tell those fascists to go away. You know, and
there's definitely influencers that are one in particular that I'm thinking of right now, who is using Palestinians, like the genocide against Palestinians, as a launching off point to like help sanitize their fascism, because they're like very much a fascist, very much a racist, very much a transphobe, a sexist. But now they're doing a lot of look how, you know, evil Israel is. And I would still, you know, I'm not going to call them an anti-Zionist, honestly. Like, I'm not going to call them that. So what does that leave them, you know? I'm not going to name names, but I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about.
I think we all know it.
I see like tweets or things from, maybe it's the same person, but it's like a white guy with an American flag in his profile. And then,
it's the same person.
Look how evil Israel is. They're bombing everyone. And it's like, yes. And you either support settler colonialism or you don't.
Right.
You're trying to be this. I think he calls himself MAGA communist or something. Like,
the wild thing is, it's like America has so much to do with it. Like, that American flag has so much to do with the situation.
And that American flag represents all the things that the Israeli flag represents too.
Yeah.
So like, it's such a hypocritical position to be pro-America.
Yeah.
And then anti-Israel or anti-Zionist. You got to be consistent against settler colonialism and all forms of colonialism.
Can I ask you a question? Because you've said anti-Semitism is white supremacy.
Yeah.
So you also say that Israel is white supremacy. And so some people would like to say that Israel can't be white supremacy because Jewish people are victims of white supremacy and therefore cannot do white supremacy. Do you have any comments on that?
First of all, I would say there's white Jews and black Jews and Jews of every different color.
Yep, and Ethiopian Jews are refused entry to Israel all the time.
Yeah, and we're forcibly sterilized by Israel as well.
Absolutely. So Zionism began as a white movement, white Jewish colonial movement. It was backed mostly by the imperialist powers and Christian Zionists for their eschatological end times fanatical beliefs and whatnot. It's always been an imperial project. It's always been a white supremacist project. Really, any supremacist project is a white supremacist project in a reality where white supremacy and colonialism are the systems that we live in, the systems that historically have shaped so much of the world. The Zionists always got their inspiration and their colonial ambitions and colonial practices. They always patterned it on Western imperialist colonialism. It doesn't matter that there are a somewhat significant portion of Israelis who don't have white skin. The fact that there's supremacy based on ethnicity and apartheid, racial apartheid and racial capitalism, which is all part of it, that fact alone is white supremacy, right? So that's what I would say to that. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
I forgot to mention one part of my journey as well, because I know you guys are communist show. So I was part of the ISO, the International Socialist Organization. That I joined in 2017, and I was active for like a year. So I definitely studied my Marx and Lenin during that time.
Excellent.
And I'm also bisexual. I like that sign.
I just saw Mule.
I was showing the chat because chat were asking like, what does it say on your sign? Yes, this bisexual stands for Palestine.
We were making fun of Mule.
Anyone listening on the podcast, that was the context.
Just said sexual above Mule's head the whole time and nothing else.
Yeah.
And you can't read the stands with part, which makes it look like this bisexual Palestine. And I find that
that's the real two-state solution.
Listen, I'm not making a placard so that everyone on the internet goes, wow, look how good that is. It's for a protest. And what it does at protests,
you're doing great.
What it does at protests is it makes people squint and go, what does that say? And
they get close enough to you, you pull them in and you tell them the good news about anti-Zionism.
I pull them in and I tell them about an affinity group action that's going on after the protest. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think about, one of the aspects of Zionist colonialism being pinkwashing, which we haven't talked about.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, go for it, Michael.
All sorts of, pinkwashing, greenwashing, or this idea that we just talked about of like, oh, Jews can't be white supremacists because they're Jews, they're victims. It's kind of like this, for lack of a better term, Jew washing. But it all goes back to the very beginnings of Zionism, where Theodor Herzl said that the Jewish state, in 1897 he wrote this, the Jewish state would be a bulwark of civilization as against barbarism. Right? That's the entire crux of Zionist colonialism. And that's why the imperialists in the West love it, because it's a quote-unquote little outpost, little bulwark of quote-unquote civilization, which is what is really civilization? It's white supremacy, as opposed to the quote-unquote barbarism of the third world or the global south. And so the idea, whenever there's pinkwashing or greenwashing or any type of washing that the Zionists try to do, it all goes back to this idea of the civilized versus the barbaric. And civilization, which holds, for example, LGBTQ rights in high regard, versus those backwards savages who would kill you if they knew you were bisexual, blah, 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 blah. That's what they try and say, BS like that.
Maybe you have had some kind of experience like this, being Jewish yourself, Michael. I'm not Jewish, but like I said, my stepfamily are. And my older stepbrother has said repeatedly to me, go and try and be queer
Right.
in Gaza. You know, go and try and be queer in the West Bank, etc., etc. And that was actually what led me to block him finally,
Yeah.
because I was
It's
sick
almost
of
a
his
kind
shit.
of threat. It's a kind of a threat that they do, and there's a common threat in Israel of go to Gaza if you care about
Yes.
Palestinians so much, or something like that, or go try being a Jew in Gaza. They say that to me. Go try being bisexual in Gaza. Whatever, anything that they'll use like that.
You know
Yeah.
what? I get it as a woman here in America. If I'm complaining about
for sure.
sexism, I'm told to go to
Right.
Saudi Arabia because that's where it's really bad. If you should be thankful that you're here, not in Saudi Arabia. It's this continued interesting direction pointing into a region.
One of
This
the
I
is-
had
most
a
this is
friend.
what- This is what I would call intersectional imperialism.
Yeah. I had a friend in Berlin, a tattoo artist that received these threats after posting about solidarity with Palestine that were basically like, you know, like, how dare you as like a queer trans person support Hamas? Like they would, you know, like they would beat the shit out of you. Basically being like, so basically I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. It's kind of like, man,
Right,
well,
exactly.
I mean, like,
Exactly.
it's like, so what? They do the thing that you want to do.
People will say threats. They'll say threats. They'll use Hamas, for example, and they'll say like, "Oh, yeah, I had someone threaten my niece because they were like saw my Facebook picture with me and my niece who's like 1 year old, and like a threat of like, oh, you know, if Hamas got hold of your niece, something like that." And it's like, that is a white supremacist threat. You like
Yeah.
the person saying that is threatening me and my family. And they're using Hamas as a boogeyman to do it, but they're threatening me. So it's like, this is the type of depravity of kind of Zionists and their supporters, whether they're white, and like many of them are like white quote unquote Christian people who are saying this to me as a Jew. Things like
I know
That's
this.
horrible.
I know this might trigger a little bit of annoyance for some people. I'm going to ask you a question about Hamas in a bit. It's not that one.
Ask me
But
another.
I'm going to ask you a bit about Hamas in a bit, but I want to finish on this pinkwashing thing, because I saw an absolutely wonderful interview with this beautiful Palestinian gay man who's like a dancer in the West Bank, and you know, just like that existence of like, you know, living in a society that like you know, needs to work on its queerphobia for sure. It's not, you know, the best, but also is on the other end of this you know, pinkwashing and saying sort of things like, look, while I know that Palestinian queer rights are not great, I'm far more at risk of being killed by a fucking Israeli settler. I'm far more at risk of being shot, you know, by someone who's just been given a gun and radicalized, you know, from the other side. And also, like, you know, anyone who wants to use that argument as some kind of an excuse for genocide, you know, look, like, yeah, I understand that we have our issues. I understand that Palestinian society is not great with queer rights and stuff like that. And he didn't say this, but this is just me adding this. But like, you know, this does come from that line of imperialist intersectionality that you mentioned, where it's like, we're going to liberate these scary savages.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're going
Right.
to help them understand queerness and stuff like that. So they hear these messages, you know, the oppressed hear these messages as well as the oppressors. And of course, if they're going to become reactionaries against queers, that is a huge reason, right? That is a huge reason. But, you know, on top of that, his final message was, this is a thing for Palestinians to sort out. It's a thing for Palestinian society and Palestinian queer people to sort out. It is not for people to make an excuse for genocide for.
Absolutely. It's not to make an excuse for genocide. And it's even more insidious than that, because it all is about this, we're the civilized West.
Yeah.
And you're the barbaric savages.
It's so funny how they're like, you know, like, oh man, they, you know, they have like socially regressive views, so we should be okay with like them getting bombed. It's like, okay, well then, like, I mean, are we just gonna like bomb America too? Like,
Right.
You know, like,
Exactly. Like the people who insist, oh, go see how Hamas will treat you if you're queer. Those are the same people who treat queer people terribly here.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And it's like
yes.
exactly what happened with a friend of mine.
And I was gonna say that Palestinians don't have to prove their humanity to anyone. They don't have to prove that they're worthy of not facing genocide by whatever the Palestinian society's issues are that they are working with or they're struggling with. There's I would encourage anyone who's to follow I think it's called Al Adwa. It's a Palestinian queer organization.
There you go.
It's definitely worth following them.
Yeah, and I have seen I've seen a bunch of queer Palestinian people speak up, and they're just like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to live in Gaza as an openly queer person, but it's that doesn't mean it's not beautiful as well, and it doesn't have all these things, and it's hard to live as an openly queer people a lot, anywhere in the world at the moment, so many places. It's just this ridiculous argument. But yeah, and there's there are well-known Palestinian artists, musicians, dancers, everything that are openly queer, and it's people have this idea that oh, okay, if you're openly queer in Gaza, they're gonna you just instantly get taken out and shot or something like that, where it's just no, I mean,
nothing is that simple. Yeah,
it's actually called Al Cause. The group that I'm talking about is Al Cause, ALQAWS. Al Cause for Sexual and Gender Diversity in Palestinian Society. You can see their website.
Yeah, you see, there's that musician Bashar Murad, who he was the one that, I'm not sure if anyone remembers the Eurovision controversy a few years back, where it was that group, the Icelandic group Hatari. They flew to Tel Aviv to perform at Eurovision, and people were like, oh, don't do that, and they were like, oh, we're gonna go, but we're gonna make our politics known, sort of thing. And they I think they had Palestinian flags on stage or something, and they got booed and cut off and all this kind of stuff. But then they released afterwards, after they flew out, they had snuck out into the desert and filmed a music video with Bashar Murad in the on occupied Palestinian territory and stuff, which was awesome to see, because they're an openly queer kind of people always don't know what to call them. They're the neo-Posadist bondage band and all this kind of like that. But a lot of their imagery and stuff is focused around authoritarianism, and they use these kind of BDSM kind of motifs as a commentary on authoritarianism. So they were it's very much in line with what they were saying and stuff. And it's this this culture, these artists, they do exist there. It's obviously regressive, it's obviously shit, they obviously get mistreated and all that kind of stuff, but we can have the discussion about regressive social views and all that kind of stuff after the genocide ends, right? It's the most pressing threat to queer Palestinians at the moment is airstrikes and IDF soldiers and tanks and things like that. We can work on the other stuff afterwards.
So the time has come for the Hamas question. So I want to ask you specifically, well, first of all, well, actually, no, I'll just ask it to you. So,
Michael, how will you destroy Hamas?
No. So in terms of Hamas, the big thing that everybody speaks about, specifically the Hasbara, for those of you that don't know what the Hasbara is, it's the communication from Israel, the propaganda ministry. The communication is that Hamas wants to exterminate Jews everywhere.
Right.
Now, the thing is, and I don't know if you know this, Michael, but you can access the Hamas Charter, the Hamas Charters online. There's two of them, actually. There was one, I think, in 1989 when it first was created. I might be wrong about
2017.
That. Yes, then there was another in 2017. Now, arguably the one in 2017 is more progressive, right? Despite them being reactionary, definitely they do have I think aims that go alongside sort of having Sharia law and stuff like this. I'm not certain about that kind of stuff, but what I am certain of is that a lot of the things that people say in terms of they want to eradicate Jews everywhere, it's actually not mentioned in the charters, like both charters, that they want to do that. It's actually mentioned. They do talk about their struggle with the Jews. That's
Right.
definitely the wording that they use. But really, all they want is they want a Palestinian state. That's what they want. And when they say the eradication of Israel, that's what they mean. They mean the eradication of Israel, the state. And in fact, and that's in the older charter, and in the newest charter, they actually say it is our, it's our ultimate plans for Palestine in its entirety. But there is some other word in there that also says we want a peaceful state where people can coexist together.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, and what are your thoughts about the sort of there are so many lies about Hamas, but what are your thoughts in general about this sort of like weaponization designed to strike fear into the heart of Jewish people about Hamas?
Right. So first of all, the idea that Hamas wants to kill every Jew in the world is absolutely false.
Yeah.
So that's first and foremost. It's not true. The second thing I would say is that their 2017 charter is actually, like, I've read parts of it, and they made great improvements from the 1987 charter to the 2017 charter. For example, in the 2017 charter, they say our fight is not against Jews as Jews, but it's against Zionists. So that's very important. That's something that they didn't clarify in their 1987 charter. So it's good that they did that. However, I would even argue that it's really not. They said in 1987, yeah, it's our struggle against the Jews. They didn't say the Zionists in 1987. They said the Jews. But you know what? I'm Jewish, and I hear Jewish people all the time talk about what the Germans did to us. Not the Nazis, but what the Germans did. Or the Russians, not necessarily Stalinists or whatever. The point is that they talk about what, they say the Germans did this to us, and they mean the Nazis. So for a Palestinian to say the Jews and they mean the Zionists, it doesn't necessarily mean they're being anti-Semitic. And especially with Israel and Zionism claiming the conflation between Judaism and Zionism and the Jewish people with the Zionist state, especially with that, you can only, some people are going to say the Jews when they mean Zionists. But it's good that Hamas put out in 2017 their new charter. I think it has much more progressive language. The general feeling I have is that nobody gets to tell colonized people how to resist or how to fight for their freedom, period.
Right.
So,
I think, I read an article, and it's from ages ago, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the author. But he was a Jewish guy, and he was talking about his friend Yaakov, who was originally just, a Jewish guy from Brooklyn, whatever. And he wasn't even Jewish. No, he was German. And then he converted to Judaism, and he changed his name. He became pretty Orthodox, and a Zionist. And he was talking specifically about when he himself, as a more progressive left-wing Jewish person, was thinking about this language that people use in Palestine, Gaza and the West Bank and stuff like this, about Jews and what the Jews are doing and stuff like this. And he was talking about how I think the line is something along the lines of, how can I attack them for saying things like this when they're coming to see the Star of David that's on the flags of all the tanks that are bombing them, in the same way that we saw the swastika, right?
Right, exactly. It's Zionism that conflates Jewish people with the Zionist state. Inevitably, some people are going to not separate in their minds between Zionists and Jews, or Zionism and Judaism. And for many Palestinians, the only thing they know of Jews or contact is with soldiers and agents of the state and oppressors. So
if even in the West, with my access to internet and constant electricity and not living in an open air prison, for most of my life, I was led to believe that Israel equals Jews.
Yeah.
Right. So I totally agree with what you're saying. The access to information alone, and what Mule is saying, waving a flag with the Star of David on it, it makes it extremely understandable that a group would be like, these are the Jews. They're telling me this is all the Jewish people, what all Jewish people want. They keep showing me that they're Jewish over and over and over again, which is, again, why Zionism is anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we're getting super, super close. This has been a great episode, by the way. Thanks so much, Michael, again for coming on.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
We're coming up to question time. So is there anything else that the hosts want to ask Michael real quick before we go into that?
No, I think we can.
We've got a lot of questions anyway, so
Yeah,
we got quite a few.
All right. Crimson Tinted asks, as a veteran of multiple direct actions, how do you balance and wield your personal privileges in service of your causes without burning yourself out or speaking over our comrades for which we're advocating?
I think there is also in the Palestine movement, there is a kind of privilege that Jewish anti-Zionists get, where when people start learning about anti-Zionism or something, then they're like, whoa, what do the Jewish anti-Zionists have to say? And like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, first and foremost, listen to the Palestinians. First and foremost, it's their voices that need to be amplified. The idea that a Jewish anti-Zionist is more representative of authority versus a Palestinian is problematic in itself and is just another example of a kind of supremacy operating.
I've never heard this perspective before. Thank you for sharing it, because that's very valuable to know.
Yeah. For me, I learned that lesson. I didn't even necessarily have anyone teach me that lesson, but I learned that lesson because this one time it was actually at a socialist organization thing where somebody was Palestinian man was talking about Palestine and Zionism and all this stuff. And I remember I stood up and I said, the idea that I said one of the fallacies of Zionism is that Zionists claim that the creation of the state of Israel was Jewish liberation, and the idea that kicking out 750,000 people from their homes is Jewish liberation is insulting to me. And although I realize, yes, that's true, that's valid. However, it's like, okay, take that up with your Jewish community. Don't, why are you bringing this up in this forum? That's what I realized. So I realized, okay, I have to be conscientious of my privilege in these spaces. I have white privilege as a white Jew. I have male privilege or masculine privilege. And, how do I utilize those to not take up too much space and speak over people whose voices should be amplified? That's just something I try to keep in mind.
It's really interesting, the example you brought up, because when people give you more attention, white supremacy, but also there is the other flip side, white supremacy to it, in that you are being tokenized as the Jewish person. And that once your opinions become not in line with what one wants of you, all of a sudden now you're no longer needed. So it's one of the fun little flipperoos.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one we got is from Sticky Monkey Flowers, and Sticky Monkey Flowers says, Q, I had a crush on my Jewish neighbor, but then I found out that they're Zionist. They say they used to want a free Palestine until they found out more. They say Jewish Voice for Peace is anti-Semitic, etc. Should I engage with them, and how? I'm a white trans woman who was raised in Scientology and got out, so I do understand how programming and stuff like that works.
Right. It's a good question. Honestly, I don't know the answer because, it's a fine line between there's some people who identify as Zionists, and I could have a conversation with them and argue with them, and I would think, okay, maybe something could come out of this discussion, because it's like there's people I know who would post the Israeli flag, and then I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you supporting the apartheid state? And we have a discussion, and maybe I can change their mind a little bit. But then there's other people who it's like, do not even engage. It's not worth it. And to be honest, I don't know always how to tell the difference between the people who could be pulled to the left, who could be reasoned with, and they're out there. But it's hard to sometimes say. In general, I would say people who are flying the Israeli flag, who are saying that Jewish Voice for Peace is anti-Semitic, things like this, it's probably not worth engaging them. It's probably not worth trying to change their mind. That's what I would probably do. If they're like somebody who's like on the fence or like they're not really sure, then then like engaging with them is definitely, worth it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a thing as well where it's like in times of, I guess, like more relative peace, it's easier to kind of just chip away at people and be like, just like show them over time, be like, hey, maybe, what you're exposed to is like propaganda, all this kind of stuff like that. But man, like at the moment, I feel like if people aren't aware of what's going on, if they don't see what's happening, it's like, how do you show them, It's like it's
Or is it worth your energy when you could be expending that and doing something far more productive with your time?
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I know. It's like because it's hard not to just like scream at them, right?
It's hard. It's hard not to like see every single like Zionist talking point I see on Facebook and then like respond with like a whole argument. But I realized like I just need to like mute some people and just not listen to them anymore. You have to walk that line and find that balance.
Yeah. You do really kind of have to like pick your battles with stuff like this and like figure out where your energy is best going to be spent. It's like the time that you spend just, like doing that kind of stuff could be time that you spend with people that, like actually organizing towards something that is a little bit more tangible. But I'm sorry, what were you saying, Kim?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on, Kim.
Yeah, I was just going to say in the question, I know that Sticky Monkey Flower said that their neighbors said they used to want to free Palestine. And like, I don't think they ever did. I don't think someone can actually genuinely align themselves and understand Palestinian what Palestinian struggle and liberation is, genuinely want a free Palestine, and then go, you know what? Never mind. I actually love genocide.
Yeah, British listeners will know this one well. It sounds like I used to be a Labour voter, but
it reminds me of people who say things like, "I'm pro-Palestine. I'm just anti-Hamas." Or
right.
like, I'm pro-Palestine and I want to free Palestine. We just need to eradicate Hamas first, or something like that. Actively supporting genocide and supporting apartheid, but saying like, yeah, I want to free Palestine, and then like, but you don't.
We actually have like a lot of like a really similar discussion that happens down here in relation to a lot of Maori gangs that people will be like, oh, like I love these communities, but like we just need to eradicate all the gangs that infest these communities. And it's like you don't understand that it's like every like scary gang member or whatever like that is a member of that community. Like it's like they're a product of that environment and they are linked to it. It's like if you go into a small town where there is a lot of like gang activity, and if you arrested all the gang members or whatever like that, like half the town wouldn't be there for work the next day because it's like they are the community as well. It's like, yeah, the idea that like any kind of like whether it's like Hamas or like Black Power or anything like that are like the separate parasite on the edge of a community as opposed to being
always
part of it is
I think I can offer like a little bit of insight into this because two members of my Jewish step family, including their wives, have messaged me after seeing all the things that I posted about what's going on in Gaza and all this stuff, and calling me basically I've been disowned essentially for all intents and purposes. It was pretty traumatic to go through some of the things that they said to me. The one of them that I thought I would probably have the most I don't know, clout with, I guess, like stepsister clout, I guess. I got back to her and I just said, Lizzie, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to hurt you with any of the things that I've said. It really upsets me that like you've reacted really badly and you feel like you've been blindsided by my opinions and whatnot. I guess all I can really say is that like I hope from the quality of my character and the fact that I've been to your weddings, I've danced the horror with you, I've done all this stuff. You know that I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate Jews. Does not, and then also, said to her as well, like, if you want to like have like a conversation on top of this where like you want to clarify some of my opinions or some of the things that I've said that you don't quite understand or that you think are hateful, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. Right. And I think that's the best thing you can do.
That's very noble of you and generous.
But I think that like, if it's just someone you want to bang, you're gonna find loads of other people that you could bang who are super hot, and they're way
The
more
world
hot
is
because
full
they're
of
anti-Zionist.
hot neighbors, yeah.
Right.
The next question is from Anarchic Alex and says, governments in Europe have banned pro-Palestine much as UK Home Secretary has talked about banning Palestinian flag, and the UK has banned councils from having BDS policies. How best can we overcome this hostile environment of protest and the attempt to smear us all as hateful anti-Semites?
Great question. You know, I don't know the answer of how best to counter that, but I mean, it's just an example of where the line is drawn in so-called free societies in Western states, of where they say that freedom of speech is a bedrock foundation of, let's say, United States or the UK or whatever. But anything that actually threatens their power in a fundamental way is going to be shut down and considered beyond the pale. So that's what they're doing, or that's why they're doing it, right, in the UK and in Europe. But how do we push back against that? You know, honestly, I just think you just reiterate that anti-Zionism does not equal anti-Semitism, and, you know, keep just keep pushing. I honestly, I don't know it. I mean, I wish I could say, like, I know how to, you know, go after the British government for their bullshit, but I don't know exactly how to do that. But just keep pushing, keep supporting BDS no matter what they say, no matter what they do, keep protesting, keep flying the Palestinian flag. Do it with Palestinians, do it with Jewish comrades that are there, do it together, and just keep pushing.
I mean, Britain is an interesting case because of all the anti-protest laws that the Tory government has pushed through already and intends to keep on pushing through. Right. The next government has no plans to change this. And so realistically, there's not like an immediate outcome within the institutions of power where we're like suddenly given back our right to protest. And that's just not really how the state works anyway. Like you just don't really have, like, we've given the police these powers that they can use if they think it's good. Right. And we're going to take those powers away again. Like, the state will always give police more powers and they'll never take them away again. But on the other hand, like, 500,000 people showed up to show solidarity to Palestine a couple weekends ago, or is it last weekend? There's a huge one planned for next weekend. TfL in London is shutting down parts of 6 tube lines and fully shutting down 4 of them for the day because the protest is going to be so large and they're going to be that overwhelmed, or they're anticipating it being that large. And I just think, like, when you're saying just keep pushing, like, it's really worth talking a little about the technicality, like this kind of the details of that. It's like our right to protest exists as much as we exercise it, and this was always true. But it's especially true as they bring in anti-protest measures. And realistically, the only point at which there is like a government in power that is supportive of the people's right to protest and views it as democratic voice is if it's a people's government that has taken power. And from now until then, governments are only going to give police more powers or let them have the ones they have. They're not going to give us back the rights to protest.
And I would just say, like, all the reactionary forces that are going to try to block protests, block free speech, block the flying of Palestinian flags, like, they might seem like they have all the power, but like they're so weak and so scared. Like, don't be discouraged by that. Like, they're going to throw everything they have at trying to shut down solidarity. But they're not going to win. We're going to win.
Yeah. While we're on Britain quickly, there's something in the chat that I'll just quickly answer, which is what is the overlap of Zionists and TERFs in the UK? Speaking as a trans woman in the UK, it's huge. All of the TERFs love Israel. They all want to support Israel. They all understand support for Palestine as a wacky leftist hard left Corbynite position that like the trans people support and all of this. There was a lot of so like Posey Parker, the Nazi Barbie, has been palling up to as many Zionists as possible, and they've been expressing their gratitude in return. This is no surprise because she's funded by CPAC, and CPAC loves Israel. J.K. Rowling's been big with I mean, even literally just like the Israeli government propaganda machine has been like using Rowling as a platform to launch off of, because they know that she's a politically engaged person with like 14 million followers. Putin did the same thing by provoking her into refuting like a solidarity with her that he expressed. But it was just really, tricking her into giving him more attention. And Israel's done the same thing, only she's sympathetic to them. There was a little bit of a group of anti-Zionist Jews actually got together. Many of them were queer and trans, to pray for Palestine in King's Cross and shut things down in King's Cross. And the Met Police came in and started arresting them. Just one of many scenes of like Jews being arrested for prayer. Because they're anti-Zionist. Earlier today, there was an old woman whose family were killed in the Holocaust, who was arrested by the Met Police outside Highbury and Islington Station. But what I was going to say was, one of these anti-Zionist Jews in King's Cross had a trans flag kippah and a hoodie that said "Punch a Turf." And
what did it say?
It said "Punch a Turf."
Oh, okay.
In Yiddish, and the
I think I saw a picture
and
of this.
And the TERFs were looking at this, Gentile TERFs, of course, and saying, we put this through Google Translate, and that's not even a real Hebrew phrase. It just comes out as gibberish. So they're not even real Jews. And I thought nothing really encapsulated the way in which they're cynically politically aligning themselves together, Israel and transphobia. Than that, really, just a bunch of genteel TERFs getting together.
The reactionaries want their Jews to be white colonizers. If they are Zionists in that sense, then they're going to accept them and say, yeah, we support Jews, yeah, we support Israel. But as soon as Jews turn against the state and turn against white supremacy and all forms of oppression, then watch those same people come with the most vitriolic anti-Semitism,
absolutely
anti-Jewish behavior, because they're the quote-unquote wrong type of Jews who are supporting Palestine, who are supporting trans rights, who are supporting freedom for everyone. Those are the wrong type of Jews according to the colonizer. But if you are the right type of colonial mindset, then they'll support Israel and they'll support you. But
no, that's one of Ben Shapiro's favorites, isn't it? You're not the right, you're
good Jews and bad Jews.
Yeah.
The TERFs down here are pretty much lined up like for, like even the ones that I think were like solely single issue TERFs, people that were like completely like politically unaligned aside from caring about TERF shit, are all like just going absolutely deranged and joining the Zionist cause. But one particularly wild thing is one of our biggest like kind of TERF commentators, who's like a journalist. She used to be all over newspaper TV and stuff, but she's kind of like gone off the deep end, she's not as big anymore. But she put a tweet that was something like, it was like, the Palestinian flag is like a combination of the Nazi flag, the KKK flag, and a pride flag all rolled into one. And it's just like, what the fuck? And there was like all these like other TERFs complaining, saying other stuff like, oh yeah, and put this flag, and put the Ukrainian flag in there too, and all this stuff. And it's just like, you people are like what is going on? Like, how does your brain work?
My God.
And it's just like, this is a glimpse into the average TERF brain,
Anyway. The next question we got
speaking of Yiddish.
Yeah, speaking of Yiddish, Huskadu says, as another anti-Zionist Jew who hasn't been able to chat much today, I like to use Yiddish to insult Zionists who tell me I'm self-hating. Gay Haken Offengahem, I think that's how you say that, is a fave. Do you have any other recommendations? By the way, I don't know what I just said.
I don't know what that means either.
It means go shit in the ocean.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Soph.
I'm not very familiar with Yiddish. The Yiddish I know is like Mir werden sie überleben, which means we will outlive them, which is something that Jews started spontaneously singing and dancing when the Nazis rounded them up. We anti-Zionist Jews and people of conscience will outlive all the reactionaries, and we will outlive whatever they throw at us. Yiddish insults, would I say, or insults to Zionists? That's a good one. To be honest, I'm questioning how much I even want to engage with Zionists in general. Like,
Yeah.
it's not worth it, really.
Yeah, very good. That's a great fucking point, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, they're fascists.
yeah.
Period.
Zionism is settler colonial fascism. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to engage with genociders, like genocidal fascists?
And like they don't care either. It's like they don't. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely ignorant people out there who are like, just don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're like putting an Israeli flag on their profile picture, and they're not like bloodthirsty, but they are supporting genocide, effectively. But like, you got to know your audience. You got to know the person you're dealing with. Can they be reasoned with? Can you have an argument and a discussion? Some people, yes. Some people, no.
We got another one here. Another one from Anarchic Alex, who asks, I know BDS has been called for and supported by many Palestinian groups, but from a communist perspective, isn't it a liberal approach to... Sorry, the little... Sophie from Mars's name tag is in the way of whatever those words
I am
are.
so sorry. I'll move it. Here we go.
We love
Isn't it
Google
a
Docs.
liberal approach based on consumer activism and international law? Isn't it kind of doomed to fail? So yeah, what do you feel about that?
I mean, it can be if it's put in that framework of like, it can be put in that framework of like human rights and international law, BDS. Can be like that, but it's also it's a tangible thing. Like the president of Bolivia just kicked the Israeli ambassador out of Bolivia. That's BDS right there, and that's great. That's tangible progress. So like full on boycott, divestment, and sanctions. I don't think that that's necessarily a liberal approach. It can be. It can be a left approach. But yeah, I would say, there's that, and like follow the lead of Palestinians. Like the vast majority of Palestinians support BDS. That's one thing. It's not the end all be all. BDS is just one tool in the toolkit. We have to have a multi-pronged approach that utilizes everything we can do. But BDS is one of those tools, I think.
Also, it's a good sign that the countries that where people are doing BDS in, the countries that are trying to make that illegal, or not, I won't say all the countries, but in America, many states, like 20 or 30 or something states, have some laws that make doing BDS some version of illegal. So, right. And you see how much Zionists shit their pants over BDS. So I think that that's a good sign, period. And I agree with you. Like I'm a vegan, and I see how many vegans will treat veganism as the end all because they refuse to participate in the consumption of non-human animals, through food, clothing, so on and so forth, in order to, boycott those companies. And I think that that's imperative. I think in order to make change in this world, we do have to start with ourselves, not just because of what we do to the world physically, but also because of our own, dare I say, spiritual elements of being a revolutionary and trying to change the world. But it's not an end. It's not it. You can't just do your consumer stuff and then be like, wow, this is the way that we changed the world. I just changed my consumption. It's necessary, but it's not the end all be all. And so that's the way that at least I interpret BDS, because I do get people trying to push back on me, claiming that veganism is some sort of liberal movement. it can be this consumer stuff that involves boycotting, right? These movements that involve boycotting as a tactic, it can be liberal, but it doesn't have to be liberal so long as you're doing, like you said, a multi-pronged approach, and then the philosophy behind it is clear of what is you're trying to accomplish.
I think that it's the sanctions far more than the boycott, which is the liberal appeal to international law, as the question said. Like it's relying on the international community to do the thing that's moral. And the critique that was being levied by the question, I think, kind of sees the power relationships between the international community and Israel, and white supremacy and American imperialism, and the legacy of British colonialism and all of this, right? And it's like, well, then calling for sanctions, who's going to do those sanctions? Is it going to be the US? Well, they're not going to sanction Israel. But I think that a boycott, and divestment, but then again, also sanctions, possibly, like all of these things are material, like Michael said, right? And it's like the boycott is named after a bunch of people who all hated a landlord called whose last name was Boycott, so much that they all just stopped interacting with him. They wouldn't serve him in stores. No one would pay their rent. And it worked. They kicked that guy out of town. Like there's a huge material element there, and it is a thing that works, and boycotts have worked again and again and again throughout history.
Yeah, and as like the state of Israel relies on a certain amount of like import export kind of stuff. Like what the biggest export is tech. There's so much stuff that is not produced domestically, so they have to get it from overseas and all these kind of things. So there are, I think, for a nation like Israel, it is a nation that could be very tangibly affected by large coordinated boycotts. In general, it is one of those things that is like, it's so easy to do. It's so easy to boycott stuff. But yeah, it's obviously not the limits of our activism. But yeah, and it's like also one of those things where it's like in solidarity with all the largest kind of Palestinian resistance groups. They say like, this is something that we can do outside of Palestine, because there's not much, like we can't, like, it's as like when things kicked off with Russia and Ukraine, it was like people were just like going over there, like it's not really possible for it to go over to Gaza, like and except in very strict circumstances, to go over and help like on the ground with like mutual aid and all that kind of stuff. So if this is what they say we can do for them, then it's like a very easy thing to do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool.
All right. We have 2 more questions, and we're so close to being out of time. This is from Alexandro Bruxo. Where are these orgs most present in Chicago, and what's the best way to stay up to date online?
Okay, so I would say follow. So like Jews Against White Supremacy is on Instagram. If you just search Jews Against White Supremacy, you'll find it. And on Facebook, it's JAWS for short. Jewish Voice for Peace is a good one to follow. I would say like for Palestinian organizations, like Palestinian Youth Movement is a very good one. The U.S. Palestinian Community Network is a good one. In Chicago, we have a JAWS, a Jews Against White Supremacy chapter that's starting, but it hasn't been formally started yet, but we have like a handful of people and it's growing. So we're going to start a chapter soon. Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago. You can find them on social media and stay up to date on local things if that's where you're coming from. But JVP has chapters in a lot of places. JAWS is starting to have more and more chapters in a lot of places. So yeah, follow the social media and also contact us on social media and ask about wherever you're locally, and we'll try and see if we can connect you with comrades.
Cool. And that actually leads into the next question, and this is for everybody. It's, are you aware of any UK anti-Zionist Jewish orgs? We have a lot of UK viewers.
Yeah. The big one is Judas. Their what's it called? Haggadah was great. They're a fun bunch, as well as being like right on with like their politics. They're a good Twitter follow or whatever, and then like they are pretty good at sharing resources to get you plugged into more anti-Zionist Jewish stuff in the UK. And Corbyn got in huge trouble for having dinner with them once, so you know that they're good if the British media hates them that much. Yeah, Judas, JEWDAS.
That's really the one that I've heard of. I know there's a it's not, I don't know what their position on Zionism is. They're called Na'amod. They say they're British Jews against the occupation. I don't know if they've taken a stance on Zionism itself. Hopefully they oppose it, but they might just call themselves anti-occupation and not necessarily anti-Zionist. So that's maybe a group to check out and explore more. But I don't, that's the limit of my UK knowledge on anti-Zionist Jewish.
Yeah, I've only seen one person from Nahmud talk, and they said, "Oh yeah, we want a two-state solution," and this might have just been a clip that was like taken out of context, or just maybe that person isn't representative of the organization as a whole. But yeah, like Michael says, make sure to do your own research. That's always important when having this.
And speaking of things that y'all can do. Michael, at the end of every episode, we ask our guests if they have any ideas for homework they can assign our audience. Every time we have a guest, we give them like an actionable thing or things they can do to kind of follow up with the whole conversation we had today. So what homework would you like to assign our audience?
There's a few things I have in mind. Well, besides the social media stuff, there's some books I recommend, but then I would say the main piece of homework I would give to the audience would be go to bdsmovement.net, the BDS website, find a organization there that is listed as one of the targets for BDS and boycott them and stop using their products. At least one, ideally do it with every single one on that list. It's hard though, because there's like Google is on that list and I have like a Google email, but my goal for my homework is to find another email provider because Google's on the list of BDS. So yeah, find one or ideally all of those companies and boycott them. That would be my homework. And then in terms of book recommendations, I've got a few. My friends wrote a book called A Socialist Introduction to Palestine by Sumaya Awad and Brian Bean. It's put out by Haymarket Books. And then I would say a book about Hamas that is worth reading is called Hamas Contained by Tarek Bakoni, a Palestinian writer. It's a really good book. It's about Hamas. It's about Palestinian resistance in general. And it's worth a read for sure. So I would say those two books for sure try and read. But if you want to just do some homework, bdsmovement.net and follow Palestinians' lead in what they're asking you to do, boycott those companies. And boycott Israeli products. I believe 729 is the barcode of Israeli products. So if you see that.
I was wondering about that. I was talking to a friend and I was like, man, I wish it was like some kind of like barcode scanner thing or something. But that's
729
that's awesome.
Then. 729.
All right. Yeah.
Good to know. That's very good to know. Well, that's awesome. Okay. I don't know if you have any last thoughts for us, but last thoughts, and also where can we find you? I know that you already mentioned your Instagram, or your org's Instagram, Instagram.com/Jews Against White Supremacy. But any last thoughts, and do you want to promote anything?
Well, you can find me personally on Threads. My username is mgberg, so MGBERG7 on Threads. Last words is just keep up the fight, keep pushing. They're going to throw everything they have at us to try and silence solidarity and the fight against oppression, but we will win. So keep pushing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for coming along on such short notice. You've been great.
Yeah, and this was a fantastic episode.
I'd be happy to come back sometime if you ever want me to.
That would be super. We would love that. You're great. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Michael. And I hope to see you out there again.
Okay. I'll see you out there again.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Stay
Bye.
in touch, Michael.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Great.
it's time to remind you all once again that Red Planet is made possible by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/red_planet, where you can support us a bunch of different ways. What's the first one, Kira?
Oh, the first one is called Sprite Mode.
Oh.
And I'm going to tell you about that in a second as I just do something.
Sprites are interesting. I always love those little fey creatures. They're so cool.
Yes, Sprite Mode.
Yeah.
Get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite. Benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you are helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, access to the Red Planet Discord, and access to our new podcast. Our new podcast that we're all doing. It's oh my God, I forgot the name of it all of a sudden.
Limited Hangouts.
The Limited Hangouts. I'm sorry, my head's mostly air, so Limited Hangouts. It's a really fun conspiracy theory podcast that we've been creating episodes for. If you are at any level, tier whatsoever, even a little adorable little sprite, you will have access to this podcast. So for as little as $2 a month, or £2, or 3 something. New Zealand.
$3.50 a month.
Close.
Yeah, plus
cool.
GST.
But Tim, could you tell me about the next tier if someone wants to support us a little bit more?
So the next step up is Goblin Mode. So that is what is it? It's $17.50 in New Zealand, fine New Zealand dollars, $10 a month in American, and it's about, what is it, like 8 or 9 British pounds?
It's £8.50.
£8.50. Oh, right in the middle. So yes, that's the next step up. Everyone loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from sprite mode, pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only places like that, access to exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts, supporting us, and all this stuff underneath. So the Discord hangouts are separate so there's limited hangouts, which is the podcast, and then there's a Discord. Yeah, we should clarify this with the Discord hangouts is more like we do like private Discord streams where sometimes it's like watching like a movie or something like that, and we'll just hang out and talk about it. Did a fun one a little while back, me and Kira, where we watched a bunch of old Star Trek episodes that had like really, I guess, they were pretty prescient kind of episodes, like really intense political themes, and we just kind of like talked about them. And I, as a total, like almost complete newcomer to Star Trek, Kira kind of guided me through, and we talked about stuff, and both of us had like additional context to add. Like there was stuff that I knew just like kind of outside of Star Trek that related to stuff that was happening in there, and then there was like stuff that she was able to talk about with like stuff that referred to Star Trek as a whole and its kind of setting and stuff like that. So that was really cool, just like bit more casual than like a stream, just hanging out and just
chilling
stuff. Yeah, so that's really cool. So that's what that means by the Red Planet Discord hangouts. So that's Goblin mode and above. So Sprite mode, you still get the limited hangouts podcast, but Goblin mode and up, you'll get the actual access to those hangouts. But so what's the next step above Goblin mode?
I mean, if you were already a sprite and you became a goblin, you've immediately sized up. And if you just are growing at a disgusting rate, you would become a beast. And that's why the next one is called Beast Mode. It costs £17. I'm going to guess it's like $20 and 420 New Zealand dollars. And holy shit, are you actually going to go Beast Mode? Holy shit, are you actually going to go Beast Mode? Well, then we can offer you all the stuff we've already talked about, and pin badges. That's right, pin badges. Wear your excellent new Red Planet pin badge literally everywhere. It is completely cool and good to do. And those would be all of the tiers if it weren't for some individuals amongst us, Mule. You know all about these ones. Only you can tell us.
They're fucking sick. I'm sick of them. You could be, if you wanted, you could be one of our sickos. It's $100 or £85 a month, or in New Zealand dollars
you're muted, Tim.
172 a button.
There you
So
go.
I had to like scroll across and also unmute myself at the same time. There we go.
And if you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of each stream. And it goes a little something like this. JBP, Nellon, Starfire, Queen Pib, Cassie Catastrophe, and Risk in First. Thank you so much for being our sickos. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for supporting our show. We've also got merch. If you're watching the stream, it will probably be coming up as modeled by our wonderful, incandescently beautiful Sophie from Mars. Look at her there. You can't ever quite possibly be as hot as her, but you could come close if you get one of our shirts from mercenarycreative.com. They're very, very cool. For those of you that are listening, it says queer existence is resistance. And it's got a picture of a poppers bottle with a hanky coming out of it that someone's lighting on fire. It's like a Molotov cocktail. It's really cool. Please consider getting our merch. We've also got tote bags.
I cropped my Papa's Molotov shirt now. It's cuter now.
Oh, you turned it into a crop top?
I did, yeah.
That's
That's something
amazing.
else you can do. You can't do that to the tote bag, though. All your shopping will fall out.
Well, you can customize your stuff in any way that you want to do. We're not going to stop
That's
you from
true.
having a completely useless shopping bag. That's up to you. You're your own full
I
person.
mean, under
and
communism, we
respect
will all
that.
be wearing uniform shirts, to be clear. Once we
It's
And
reach
they'll all be
communism,
crop tops with a slutty
we will have
waist.
mandatory crop tops for everybody.
Yeah.
That's right.
So thank you so much, everyone who supports us and everyone who's about to go support us right now over at patreon.com/red_planet or buy our merch at mercenarycreative.com. But I have a really important question for Tim. Where can people, and by people I mean Tim heads, the best people that there are, find more Tim online?
You can find me here on Twitch or over on YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. Yeah, I haven't really been streaming much outside of the stream for a long time because I've been way too busy. Do want to get back at it though, but yeah, otherwise just follow me for spicy tweets from Twitter. We've got
Don't forget Tim spicy remixes. Specifically ice spicy remixes.
I didn't remix that. I posted
okay.
it and linked it to the thing. There's a really there's a great video that a friend of mine sent me after I posted a Hamas fan cam that I made. Well, actually, I made that. I made the inspired by the old like new metal AMVs that you used to get back in the day.
Yes.
With Deftones, with tanks blowing up and stuff like that. But then a friend sent me a remix of it's like Ice Spice mixed with the PFLP's Razor Red Banner, and it just like slaps so hard.
It goes so hard. It's great.
One of those mashups that is just like, like, how did this happen? Like,
It
this
works
is
really
amazing.
well.
And it's from like
really
a couple
well.
months ago as well. Like, it's not like super recent. Soph, what about, where can we find more? Where can real Soph heads find more? A bit more about you.
Yeah, well, all my stuff is at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. I am on Twitter, unfortunately. I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm on Tumblr and Instagram, and my main thing is I make videos on YouTube that are video essays that discuss theory, politics, and philosophy. I'm working on a couple of my episodes of my series Monster Men at the moment, which is about monster stories, where they come from, what they mean, and why we tell them. I'm also getting back into Twitch. I did have a little bit of a burnout. I was not streaming for a minute, but I've gotten back on the liberal slop stream. People seem to be enjoying it a lot, where we look at publications that produce liberal slop that helps to reinstate and reinforce the liberal hegemony. We've been reading a lot of praise of Keir Starmer from the New Statesman. We had a fun one earlier today. I've also just today, and I'm probably going to do some more of this, been getting back into Shadow of the Colossus speedrunning because my girlfriend has a original PS2, and I was like, oh shit, Shadow of the Colossus time. And now I'm like, okay, I can actually play a game on stream again. But yeah, everything is at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. My Patreon is also there, so you can see my work early when it's done. There's some stuff up early there now, in fact. Anyway, linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars to find all the stuff in one place. but is there a convenient way to find all the stuff in one place for Kira Chats?
Oh, there is actually. I also have a link tree. It's linktra.ee/Kira Chats. But if you want to just, hang out with me, the three places you can find me the most. My Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Kira Chats. I stream 5 days a week. We're going to stream tomorrow. I'll talk about the news and play some video games. We're still playing Baldur's Gate 3. We're in Act 3, and I really enjoy the game. I'm not a nerd, but I really enjoy the game. But I'm not a nerd, so it's fine. So Twitch, not a nerd. Twitch.tv/Kira Chats. You can also hang out with me on Discord, discord.gg/Kira Chats. I'm always on there. It's a really good time. I recommend joining, especially if you want to have like a chill space with anti-Zionists, like anti-fascists. We watch movies and all sorts of stuff. It's fun. And then the third place you can find me is my Blue Sky. I mean, like, I'm on Twitter because of necessity. Like, I'll still post things here and there. I do want to show some vocal support for Palestinians, but it's such that place is a mess. So most of my social mediaing is Blue Sky. So you can find me at my Blue Sky is kirachats.bsky.social. And just letting you know, if you don't have an account for Blue Sky because you don't have an invite code, join my Discord, discord.gg/Kira Chats. We give them out all the time to people. We just have to vouch them that you're not some like obnoxious lib or something. If you hang out with us and you're chill, you want a code, we need more cool people on Blue Sky. I mean, there's a lot of people, but I want people to have a refuge from Twitter and be able to still post. So join my Discord and ask for an invite code. Yeah. But Mule, can I find my sweet little peanut? I want a peanut butter jelly sandwich immediately. How can I obtain one?
Yeah, well, that's on a website I can't tell you about. But anyway, if you want to see more of me, well, oh wow, you could go on linktree.ee/DJ Mule and help me out. Watch my new video. My new video is done really, really badly, and it is actually really, really good. And I'm not just saying that. It's pretty fucking good. It's about how TikTok Live is really bad, and there's just a load of bad people on there, and we have a little bit of a laugh at those people and talk about why they're bad. So if you want a bit of a like relaxed, but also kind of serious, but also kind of funny, but also kind of not funny video to chill out with while you're eating your cereal or whatever, then you could go over there to my YouTube and find that. Also go to patreon.com/DJ Mule and give me money. If you're listening to the show on our podcast, then it's DJ MUEL. And that's all I really got to say. Like subscribe to Red Planet because I'm editing the new Zad documentary that is going to come out very, very soon. And I don't know if we're going to be releasing it widely. I think it's just going to be for patrons, but it's really, really good. And I can say that firsthand because I'm making it, and also so is everybody else.
It'll be for patrons first, but we will be releasing it later.
There you go. There's the clarification that I wanted. Thank you, Sophie. Sophie's voice, Sophie's face. Sophie went to France and did all the correspondence stuff. It's amazing. But also Kira's voice, my voice, Tim's voice. It's all going to be in there. It's going to be a huge, amazing project. Very excited for it. So yeah, support me by supporting the show, I guess. So there you go.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Fingies. Whoa. Yeah, what a show.